remember everyone.
The only people to remember are your clients and your teammates. The rest of them don't matter.
All right. Excellent. I think I can do that.
Yeah, the client part is the important part.
There you go.
Okay, I'm going on incognito.
Yeah.
So let's see here. I still use dot loop, so that's where we will go for now. For me, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's contract's contract. I can get it to go up.
Hey.
Send a text to me.
Up at the desk is contract.
Okay, so windows. This will be a good one because it didn't work out. You got a contract back there? You're on your own. You're not with this group, right?
No, not
She's-
at all.
She's one of us.
She'll deny it, but
Who's the other 6?
They thought they were too cool.
They couldn't do it. Are
They're
you
waiting.
ready over there? You gonna stay over there?
I'm ready. This is my like ignite seat. This is my every seat.
All right, so I'm Jim Boland, so I'm the broker. They have to have a designated realtor. You learn that in school. Somebody that ultimately is responsible for every action that you take, wherever you take it, whether it's in Salem, Lebanon, Plato, it doesn't matter. It ends up on my desk if there's a problem, so don't create problems with the person. All right, we do have 2 brokers, and we have more than 2 that can sign, so you might see a signature from Rachel Watson because she's a broker also, and she has the right, we can assign people to sign documents like your designated agency and stuff like that. So if you see somebody else's signature, that's fine. But if it's a licensed deal, typically new licensees for sure, then it has to be the DR. Here's the deal. So you know already, and most of you know too, but I'll remind you, I always start the class with this. Your one job in real estate is lead generation. I mean, that's the bottom line. I don't care who you are, what you do, it's lead generation. And you need to grasp that first before you do anything else. Contracts are a piece of cake. You're just filling in blanks. Somebody else is telling you what they want. So don't worry about the contract or don't worry about the documents. We can get that straightened out, through compliance or the brokers or, your team leader or whatever it might be. It's more about, I need to generate a lead because without that, you don't have anything. It doesn't, you could learn the contracts backwards and forward and be the smartest guy in the world, but without that lead generation, your primary source of lead generation is your sphere of influence. And you all live generally in the Lebanon area, right? But you don't all have the same sphere of influence. You think you do. You think everybody knows everybody. Hell, that's wrong. I mean, that's not the truth. They just don't. The group that you grew up with and know is not the same group that she knows. And even though she's all over the place now, there's still another 5,000 or 6,000 people that she doesn't know. So when you think about your sphere of influence, you always think first about that family center. That's where you want to start with. Hopefully your mother will buy a house from you if she needs one, or your sister or your brother. Not always happens, but most of the time they should. But there's a group of 10 generally that you know in that close-knit group. But the thing is, you have to understand that it's like a bicycle wheel, that out from that group, this person knows 10 more that you don't know, and so on. And that's how you create a database. It really is. The beauty of command is you can take your phone and everybody that's in there, just press it and it shoots everybody into the command deal. Now you've got a database created. But you need to add to that too, and you need to add to it really on a weekly basis. In the old days, you know, I've been around so long, at 5 people a day, well, hell, you can't handle that. No offense, you know. I mean, if you get 2,000 people in your database, even with command, it'd be difficult to handle. You need to have a core, and then from that core, that should generate more opportunities. So remember that lead generation is the key. And there's a, you know, you can wear a name tag or your Keller Williams shirt, which I do every day. And somebody always, I don't care where I go, somebody says, how's the real estate market? Great. It's always great to me, you know. I mean, I'd rather be doing this sitting in a cubicle somewhere. You can do that. You can do name tags, signage, events, which you're good at, church, grocery store, athletic events, sponsoring athletic kids. I used to love to do that when I was much younger and I had to really work hard for my business. Every little league team needed a sponsor by a guy that had bowling on the back of it. I mean, I had one time, I coached 5 softball teams at the same time down in Branson, fast pitch. And they were all like 8 to 10, but we always had to have a parent meeting. So we have a parent meeting, say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to try to, you know, conquer the world or anything. But this is kind of generally what we're trying to do. Introduce them to the game, blah, 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 blah. Here's my card. If you ever need anything, you know, call me. But it was my business card, you know, it was my real estate business card. Now, I didn't sell all 75 of them, whatever number there was, a house, but at some point or another, I generated business off of that. But those are easy, fairly inexpensive to do, those kind of things. Or you can actually coach a team, which, you know, as long as you're not a butt, you know, then you'll generate business off of that too. Open houses, I don't know, they work in Lebanon?
Nobody does them and we're trying to start doing them
Oh,
because
my.
no one does them.
That's the same thing I heard in Branson when I was down there and way back in the 90s, you know, talking about, well, we don't do those down here. And I'm like, well, I'm gonna do them then. If nobody else is doing them, if I get 2 people in the open house, I mean, surely there's a 50% chance I can capture 1. If I get 10, I can still probably capture 1. I'm not gonna capture all 10 of them, but open houses are a great way because people don't stop to look at a house that don't have any interest in real estate. They got some interest. It may be a remodel, you know, who knows? They could be commercial, they could be whatever. So I wouldn't be afraid to do open houses anywhere. Signage is really important. It sounds like a big investment. It's not. Use your arrow signs and they'll get stolen, but they're cheap enough, you know, that you're not going to go broke buying them if you have to. But get enough arrow signs to get somebody to the houses, and then obviously sign calls are a big option too. But I mean, there are 1,000 ways to generate leads. Do not buy a billboard. Don't put your name on a damn bus. What else is stupid? Television. Radio, if there's a main station in Lebanon that somebody uses or listens to, or in your area, but here, I don't know that that's not a way to at least get your name in front of some people, as long as it's inexpensive. You've got to have a return on investment. If you don't have a return on investment, and the thing with radio, there's some ads that are running now. I forget that book. 50 things you don't want to do in your advertising. Anyhow, it should be entertaining. It shouldn't be, I'm provide the best service in America. I mean, you know, sure you do. Everybody says that, you know, whether it's Google or Amazon or whatever it doesn't matter. Everybody says that. That's not the thing. Have fun with it, you know, enjoy yourself, make it entertaining if you're going to do any marketing at all. But be very careful spending your marketing dollars. Before this year, I hadn't spent anything in 7 years, not a dollar, nothing. And I do typically, I still sell, so I do, you know, right around 7 to 10 million a year, but not a penny. I didn't spend anything, nothing. I didn't even buy signs because I've got a ton of them, or lockbox or anything else. I didn't do anything. We didn't do an open house, I don't think, for a couple of years. But the point is, I've been in it a long time, but that doesn't make you necessarily that much better or a household name. Ethel Kerbo, who's been around for 40 years down here, she's got billboards. And I cannot imagine somebody driving down the road and looks at that billboard and says, oh, hell yeah, I got to call her right now. So, I mean, you just got to think about what really works. And the best thing that works is face-to-face. Phone calls, even texts now are pretty effective, you know. Emails are good as long as they're on a regular basis, because you want to be top of mind is what you want to be if you're going to lead generate. Okay? Questions on that? Anything else? You want to know what doesn't work? I can tell you what doesn't work if you ask me.
What doesn't work?
Billboards, newspapers, not anymore. This doesn't work anymore because nobody reads that, you know. So you've got to get in, if you're going to use any kind of marketing, it's got to be something that gets in front of people. And you want to get in front of people that actually want to buy. That's why open houses work or sell. One or the other. That's why open houses are effective. You know, it may take, like you said, it may take some mindset change, but I think you're trying to change the mindset of the public, not the other realtor. You don't care. They don't want to do them. That's fine. And it's 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon, which is kind of a bummer because we work all the time. We'll take off Thursday. You know, just go give all your, you know, give your phone to somebody and go take off on Thursday. Go to church Sunday morning if you do. But definitely, you know, think about that. And that's the best time to do them because everybody else is off too. Does the State Factory, they work Sundays too, don't they, probably? Your barrel factory up there?
I don't,
They have a shift.
They have a shift.
They
on
do now,
Sunday.
okay.
Well, they'll be the only people other than the people that are working the service industry. Everything else is pretty much off, you know, so. Right? Okay. All right. We'll start with the contract then. Ask any question you want, and there are no silly questions. It really isn't when you're talking about real estate or anything else, because if you don't know the answer, it'd be better than going home and saying, man, I wish I'd asked that question. Okay? So we start first with the contract itself. And notice what it says. Contract has legal consequences. If you don't understand it, consult your attorney. You know, it's really important that people understand a contract should be binding. And we say, it says it later there, but it should be binding. If you're going to enter into this, you know, you better be certain you're going to do it. These people right here that entered into this contract were serious about buying. And then 5 days later, the 80-year-old lady who's got lots of money, I want out. I just know I've made a decision, bad decision. And I'm like, that's not how it works. And I did get her out of the contract, but they shouldn't have let her out. And I wouldn't have cared if they didn't. I mean, it's not about the price or the commission or anything like that. I believe in the contract. You enter into a contract, by God, you better close. But they didn't. So we'll go on with that. But notice this is Norman and Linda Shaw Family Trust. Linda Shaw is the one who's got all the money in this deal, but it's in a trust, and her daughter is actually the trustee, and they're trying to buy a house together. Norman died last February, and Linda wants to get the heck out of her house because he died in the kitchen, and she just can't stand to be in the house anymore. I get that. But I've been selling them, I've been showing the property now it'll be a year. And so we finally write a contract. We'd actually written one before, but this one actually stuck. So I'm thinking, okay, whew, now I can go on with my life, but now it works sometimes. The key to this is, as you see, a trust can buy a property, and an LLC can buy a property, and an individual can buy a property. And if it were husband and wife, the husband can buy a property or a wife can buy a property. If you get a loan, the lender may come back and say, well, you know, she or he needs to be on the contract, but all of those people can buy it. The key is who can sign. So on the Norma and Linda Shaw Family Trust, the only person that can sign is Jeanette Shaw. She's the trustee. Linda, even though it's all her money, can't even sign anything. So it's a question to ask if they say, hey, we want to put this in our corporation. Like I've got a S Corp called Kelby Lane Inc. So if I put Kelby Lane Inc. up there, who can sign? That's gonna be the first question that I'm gonna ask the buyer that says, I wanna put this in this, whatever it is, a trust or whatever. And in my case, my wife and I both can sign, or we can sign individually. But that's not always the case with corporation. A lot of these investors that buy houses to flip, they've got a little S corp formed or something like that. You've got to find out who the signatory is. And you can't put on the bottom line of this thing, Norma and Linda Shaw Family Trust, sign like that. It's got to be an individual. It's got to be somebody with blood running through their system. Okay? No questions there? You guys already knew that? That's
So
great.
how would you find out who the person is?
You have to ask.
Just ask around.
So, yeah, I mean, typically if you're working with a buyer, you're gonna have a lot of conversations anyway. And that's why I don't believe in transaction brokerage, you know. Transaction brokerage is supposed to be arm's length representation. I'm just passing papers back and forth. You get in a vehicle with somebody or show them a house, you're gonna know their life history in about 2 days. You know everything about them. So if they say, we're gonna put this in our trust, then you say, you know, who's the signatory on the trust? Who can sign?
All right, you just take their word.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because here's what happens. All right, let's say Norman and Linda Shaw Family Trust told me, we're gonna put on our trust name. And then Linda signs it, okay? And then I get a copy of the trust. That's the next thing I'm gonna do as soon as we go under contract. I want that trust sent to the title company, but I want it sent to me too. And I mean, it's pretty easy. Right there about in some place in the trust, no matter how big it is, it says you have the right to buy and sell real estate. That's one of the things that the title company looks for. And here's the signatories. So you can find out who that's pretty easy actually. But yeah, you trust them. Hell yeah, gotta trust them. I mean, they're not gonna lie to you for the heck of it, you know?
Yeah.
I'll try not to cuss anyway.
We like it.
Doesn't bother me.
Damn, I
Makes
just
me feel
warn you
normal.
that
Yeah, yeah.
I keep forgetting it's being recorded. But you have to trust your buyers. And again, you know, that's one of the things individuals, women especially, I always think of working with a buyer. Trust your intuition. If it's somebody you shouldn't be with, dump them, get out of there. You know, if somebody calls you and wants to see a property and I don't care where it's at, it's in the middle of Lebanon or where it's at, but you just don't feel good about it, take somebody with you. It could be 2 girls, but take somebody with you. And one of the rules, safety rules always, don't go in the house first, let them go in the house. Leave the door open, especially if it's a vacant property and things like that. I mean, just the little things that you want to do. And there's a 15-second rule is what I've always taught is that, okay, I'm in my car, I get to the property, if the individual's there or, you know, I wait 15 seconds. I want to look around and see what's going on. Is there anything that doesn't look just right or feel right about this? Because your life's not worth, you know, any commissions, you know that. All right, so we got that. The contract used to say next line was seller. Now the attorneys have decided, oh, that doesn't matter. We're just selling a piece of property. So you don't even need to know who they are. So now the first time you see the seller is the last line on the property, which I still don't understand that, but you know, I'm not an attorney. Okay, so seller agrees to sell, buyer agrees to buy the real estate. If you look at line 4, it talks about a municipality, if incorporated, this is the name. If you go to St. Louis, you got Manchester and Ladue and all of these places that are municipalities. Even though they're called St. Louis, they're not. They're, you know, separate municipalities. We don't have that here. We got Springfield, we got Lebanon, we got Nixa, we got whatever. But some of the companies in the area want you to put a city in there. So if you just want to do it, just put Lebanon in there or put whatever it is. Like this thing's out in the friggin' boonies. So it's not in the municipality this house is. So I knew that. So I didn't put anything in there when I wrote this. But if you're getting towards closing and the other company says, we need you to put in there an initial blah, blah, blah. Don't argue, just do it. It's not worth the argument. You know, you don't have to explain to them it's not a municipality. All right, and here we have the address then, and you need to make sure on the address that you have the proper suffix and the proper address, obviously. 3376 Myers Hollow Road. If you put avenue in there or street, or drive and you get to the closing and the underwriter runs a last time search and finds out that it's not road, it may kick the contract out for 5 days. And here's the thing to remember. If I've got a closing date today and they say, we've got to change that and we can't close for 3 more days, then that contract dies at midnight without signatures of both parties. So you don't want that. And this is really common in government loans. If you get the wrong road, avenue, drive, circle, whatever it is. So you make sure that you get that right. And you can depend hopefully on your title companies to do that. And then Marshfield, and we've got the zip code, which is correct. And then Webster County. And if you're dealing down in Webster or Marshfield, Rogersville, Seymour, you got to be careful because the line's all over the place. And so you'll end up in the wrong county. You don't want that. Now this has 56 acres, this property. And normally I would have checked that box and I can't tell you why I didn't. Because typically I would take at least the aerial and attach that and have it initialed. Now, it wouldn't be the legal description necessarily, but I'd have the plat of the property. And I don't know why I did that. I'm not sure. But I think on most properties that you're dealing with acreage, it's a good idea to attach the plat if you have one. And if you have a survey, attach that. The deal is make sure that all parties initial that. So it becomes a part of the contract. So if I'm buying 56 acres and by God, I want 56 acres. I think maybe the reason I didn't do this one because the plat, this is Rebecca Kepper, who used to work here, but I encouraged her to seek opportunities elsewhere because of her behavior and her some contractual issues. And she had 53.6 acres, and then there was a separate 2-acre parcel that she hadn't included in the documents. So that may be the reason I did that. Not sure. But anyhow, but if you check that box, then it must be included because it becomes a part of the contract. And especially on properties that have been separated. And you guys get a lot of that up there where you got a 80-acre parcel divided into 240s. You want to attach a legal description if there's a survey. If there is not a survey and they're doing it to say a survey will be provided prior to closing, then that goes in not only the included, but it goes in the special agreements that a survey must be completed prior to closing. And we'll get to the title work on that in a minute. All right, inclusions and exclusions. You want to get yourself in trouble and buy something like a refrigerator? Here it is. And if you look at this, it's pretty straight up. Property includes, but not limited to, all of the following, which are now located on the real estate, all of which seller warrants to convey to buyer free and clear at closing. This contract, the 4 corners of the 8-page contract, and not a seller's disclosure statement. MLS detail sheet or other promotional material provides what's included in the sale. Because here's where you get in trouble, right? The disclosure says I got a refrigerator and I got 2 garage door openers and I got this and I got that. The MLS sheet says refrigerator. The marketing material, promotional materials got that $5,000 French door refrigerator in it, right? Your client thinks all of that's going with the house. You don't include it, and you go to the house the day of the walkthrough, and that $5,000 refrigerator is gone, and they're like, where's the refrigerator? Well, we didn't include it in the contract. Well, you didn't tell me to. So who's buying that refrigerator? I mean, it might be the buyer's agent, right? Obviously, you call the listing agent and say, hey, the refrigerator's not there. And if they're having any training, they'll say, you didn't include it in the contract. So you got to be careful with that. I've even had islands that have been taken out of houses.
That would be a fixture?
Yeah, no, if it doesn't have electric attached to it and you bump it and it moves, you better write it in the contract. And I'm talking granite top islands that have just been taken out of the house. Had one where a girl called me and she goes, hey, we're doing the walkthrough and the island's gone. And then there's a rack, where they hung the pans. It was pretty nice, big, whole length of the island. It's gone too. And I said, was there electric? No, there's no electric. But I mean, obviously it's a fixture. I said, were there end tables in the living room by the couch? And she said, yeah. I said, are they there? She said, no, that's not a fixture. I said, neither was the island. It's not attached. So you got to do the bump tests on the islands. If you're not sure, just hit it with your hip. Now, I did tell her, I said, now, that oven, that whatever you call it, that rack, top rack, you need to call them right now. You need to shoot a picture and say, first thing you do is shoot a picture, send the picture to the other agent, call the agent, say, we got a problem. You know, that rack needs to be returned, you know, and if it's not returned, then we'll find something online comparable and you can compensate us at closing. But one or the other has to occur. And I'd really like to have the island back. And the girl says, well, the island wasn't a fixture, you know, it wasn't included in the contract. But she couldn't argue about that because that's affixed to the ceiling and attached, no arguments there. Be careful. You don't want to buy these things. I had a girl yesterday call me, bought a refrigerator. Stupid, just stupid, you know. All right, so it's pretty obvious, a lot of this stuff. The fences on the hardwired pet systems, and it includes the collars. Now, I've seen buyers or sellers take the collars and they'll reserve them because they got Rottweilers, okay? If you got a Rottweiler, you got a collar that big. You got a Chihuahua, you got a collar that big. And they're taking their dogs with them, so they take the collars with them. You know, I don't think you can argue with that a lot because you might have a Chihuahua and they may have had a Rottweiler and the collar won't work anyway. You wouldn't think anybody would take a ceiling fan, but I've seen it. So, I mean, this is walkthrough stuff. Flush mounted speakers. I mean, there's arguments. Is that a flush mounted speaker, that white one on the wall? If you're not sure, you should include it, right? If you want those speakers in the, whatever room they call it, the TV room or whatever, and you're not certain whether it's flush mount or not, you should include it. Attached antennas and TV mounts. The antennas, who cares? We care less about that. But the mounts, up until a few years ago, everybody would take the TV and the mount. And if you look behind this one, there's a hole that big. And so the hole's there, but the mount's gone. And then even when they did take the mounts and fix the hole, it never matched, right? Cosmetically, it looked awful because that paint, I don't care if you get it today and take that off and fix that new drywall and all that, texture's not the same. The color's not the same. So the mounts should be there. Smart thing to do is just include the TVs in the offer. They're cheap now, right? So you can get TVs. I mean, you don't have to, it's just an idea. Solar panels. If you see solar panels on a house and you're a listing agent, the first question out of your mouth should be, do you own the solar panels? And the answer in most cases is going to be, no, we have a loan on them. How much do you owe? And it's going to be a ridiculous number, $33,000 or something. To say, are you going to pay for those at closing? No. Do you have a loan on them? Yes. Is the loan transferable? If they say, yeah, it's transferable, say, I need to see the paperwork. That's if you're the listing agent. If you're a buyer's agent, then what do you say? Do the sellers own the solar panels? All the same questions. Is there a loan on it? How much is owed? Is it transferable? Because you think about it, you take somebody, and we have one recently, it's a $150,000 house with $33,000 solar panels. Well, everybody, not everybody, most people, first-time home buyers can afford a $150,000 house, right? Most of them, if you got two people working or they're making good money or whatever. But you add $33,000 to the loan, and now you've taken them, their debt to income's not work right and it won't work anymore. So you know, these are a big boogaboo right now. So be careful when you're reading the MLS. If you see solar panels mentioned, ask them, you know, because if they have to remove them, what do they have to do? Well, I mean, they get the company to come out and remove them, which we've had that done before too, but then they got to patch the house. They got to patch the roof. So you got 42 holes in there, you know, little dots. So just be careful with solar panels. Propane tanks will always get you in trouble. If you're listing the house, the first question you ask, if you see propane, is do you own the tank? And if you don't own the tank, then you make sure you put in the MLS that it's leased. And if they say propane tank to be included, then I would really respond to them. It's included. It's going to come with the house, but it's leased. And it's leased through which propane company?
I have one.
Do they have one in Lebanon?
We,
They do.
he's
Use
from
one.
Pulaski County. Mountain Country, MFA.
Yeah, I would reference it. You know, I would make sure for your buyer especially that they understand, number one, you don't own the propane tank and the seller can't even buy it. You know, the propane companies typically won't sell them to you if they've got it leased because they want that money and they want it to continue. And then you'd also make sure to tell your buyer now, any propane left in that tank, you have to buy at closing. And you can roll it into your loan if your lender will let you. If not, you're going to have to bring a check. We get that same battle all the time where people go, well, that's not right. But if you've ever been in a farm and you have a diesel tank on property and you got a 200-gallon diesel tank and it's got 200 gallons of diesel in it, you want to get paid for it. So just remember that. Hardwired security and alarm systems. This is becoming an issue also because you've got all these wireless ones with the Ring doorbells and all that. So if you want that Ring doorbell, even if they say in the MLS it's reserved, if you want it, write as it included. Or if they've got Simply Safe, you've heard of that, right? That's a nice system, real nice system. If they've got that already in the house, say Simply Safe system to be included in the sale. Most of this you're okay on. You get over here, dishwashers, obviously, garbage disposals, but these barbecue grills and fire pits, now we're getting to the problem where the fire pits, you know, are outside, the barbecue grills are outside. Sold a house about a month ago in Willard, and they took the fire pit because it's portable. They didn't take it till after we'd closed, but they came back and got it before the woman got there. It was portable. The barbecue grills, though, a lot of them, you know, they're built now for the Komodos, whatever you call them, those things, green eggs. If you want the green egg, what should you do?
Write it in.
Include it in your offer when you get down here. Microwave ovens built in. It's pretty easy to tell whether one's built in or not. If it's on the counter and you want it, then you got to write it in. This is all stay. Blind shades, shutters should stay with the house, but curtains, a lot of people have curtains that they like. They can take the curtains if they want to. You need to be clear to your seller that you probably want to put a reserve on those to make sure that there's no problems. But they can't take the drapery hardware because that leaves holes in the walls that have to be patched. So that has to stay. So I can take my flowing purple curtains, but I've got to leave the hardware there for the next person. So whether on the buy side or the sell side, if you're on the sell side, you make sure your clients know. If you're on the buy side, you want the purple curtains, we're going to write it in the contract and see what they say. Attached floor covering, you wouldn't think anybody would check a carpet, but they've done it before. So you can see in this one, this is just a real example. This is what we did. We wrote in there, refrigerator in kitchen. Why did I put in the kitchen there?
Because they might have one in the garage.
I got a green one in the garage right now. So it holds all the beer and some other food, but mostly beer.
Same here.
But I could have left that in the house, right? Rather than that, if I don't put in the kitchen, washer and dryer, hutch and dining table, Kubota tractor and all attachments along the lean-to and the John Deere riding mower. Okay, so there's a lean-to on the shop and it had tractor, brush hog, backhoe, log splitter. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff. So I just said all attachments along the long lean-to and the John Deere riding mower. Okay. What else could I have included or maybe should have included? Just anything. I don't care what it is. Just say it. Huh?
The island.
The island. Yeah, if I wasn't sure about it, it was attached. It had electric. Think about storage buildings in the backyard. Because they're not, unless they're on concrete or have footings, they're not attached. And you know, you show up for the walkthrough and that shop, the little 12 by 20 shop is gone. perfectly legal. How about the play set in the backyard?
Attached.
Not attached. How about the above ground pool?
Not attached.
Which way are we going with that? Keep it? I mean, some of them are nice if they got the deck all built around them, but most of them are out there. We want the excluded on that one, maybe. And then propane tanks, they had 2 propane tanks, but in the MLS, it said they were both owned, so we didn't have to deal with that. Anything else? Gnomes. Had a lady one time, she had 40 gnomes. She said, I don't care what they want, they're not getting my gnomes. I'm gonna make sure that doesn't happen, you know, I'll guarantee that. But we've had people take up plants too. You know, trees, flowers, whole works.
Oh my gosh.
What else could you exclude?
Personal property?
Yeah, if there was something statuary, for example, my mother-in-law's house, when she was alive, across the street from her, there's some Oriental folks, and they had 2 big dragons with lions' heads on them, probably weighed 1,000 pounds apiece. Well, the next buyer might not have wanted them, so you would have excluded them, right? And actually, the seller may wanted to keep them anyway, you know, because they're with their culture. So those are items you have to think about. You can't ignore those smaller items that are going to create problems for you. I'm telling you, that damn refrigerator comes up once a month with me, where somebody will call me and say, hey, they took the refrigerator. And say, you know, did you have it in the contract? No, but they had it in the MLS and the disclosure, and then there's pictures of it, you know, sideways and all this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go with the house. So don't get in trouble like that. Your buyers will think you're a real not very smart
So
person.
you said a tree, they could dig a tree up and take it, that's not a fixture?
No, they can't, but they do
Do it
sometimes.
anyways.
So, I mean, again, my deal is always the same. Click, send, hello. You guys took 3 trees out of the backyard and we want them replaced. Either bring them back and replant them, or we want compensation for all 3 of those trees.
So they are a fixture, they can't just take them.
He's great. Pay attention. We're just here.
How are you? We're having a contract class. You want to
Yes.
jump in or?
No. I'm just gonna show her around, but you keep talking. She's hope you're not recording right now.
Yeah, it's all right. All right, so are we clear on that? Because you'll get in trouble. This is the first place you'll get in trouble. Let's say you screw the name up. You're not in trouble. You can write an amendment to say, the seller's name is Brian with an I versus Y. I need to add the husband. I need to add the wife. The trust was the James L. and Christine L. Boland Living Trust, amended January 3rd, 1962, and amended again. I mean, that's what you have to put in there if you put in the proper name. You can do all that through amendments, but this kind of stuff you can get in trouble with because it doesn't normally come up till right there when you're about to close. So this included and excluded thing. You make sure, and if you have any doubt in your mind whether it should be included, include it. If your client wants it, put it in there, negotiate and see what you get. Okay, purchase price on this one, it was listed at $689,900, so that's what we wrote it for. Because we're asking for $20,000 worth of equipment and the refrigerator and the hutch and all the other stuff. So we're trying to get a little discount there without discounting the price. Notice that we didn't ask for any concessions. This is a cash buyer, so they really don't need concessions. Can a cash buyer ask for concessions?
Yeah.
Sure. There's no reason they can't, because they're going to have costs associated with the transaction. So I could have written in there $5,000. That probably would have covered any title costs or anything that we would have had, more than enough on a cash transaction, but you can. Most of the time, concessions are used to cover loan costs, especially in government loans. If you're an FHA buyer in the current market, I don't think Lebanon's any different, right? 200,000 is about where you're going to find a decent house now. Well, if you've been able to save 3.5%, which what you'll have to have for an FHA loan, 200,000, 2 times 3.5 is what, 7?
7. Yeah.
Okay, so you got $7,000 you saved up, set over here to close with. But guess what your loan costs are gonna be? About 7. Loan origination fees and all that's gonna be around $7,000. And I've had sellers just balk and say, well, I'm paying. I'm like, look, you know, you got these 2 kids, they're both working at Walmart, making $15 an hour. Now, it sounds like a lot of money to people that are old, but that's $30 an hour total times 4, that's $1,200 a week. And they got childcare, car payments, taxes, rent, maybe student loans, whatever. And they've been able to save $7,000. There's not a lot of, no offense, not a lot of people got $7,000 sitting in cash. So I tell my sellers, you know, they're asking for assistance. This is going to be their first purchase ever. Now, if you don't want to do that, or you just think that's totally crazy, here's a suggestion. We'll split it, okay? We'll raise the price from 200,000 to 200,000, 200 and 3,500. And then we'll leave the 7,000 there, and you're paying 3,500. And they're basically paying 3,500 more in the loan. But we've covered their concessions now, and now they can buy their first house. But for somebody to just throw up their damn arms and say, no, you know, when somebody's worked so hard to save money as hard as it is now, that's just crazy. So you need to think about that. I want you to think about this, because you're going to be dealing with first-time home buyers. And one of the first questions you need to ask their lender is, do they need concessions? And the lender's going to say, yeah, they need X. And so you need to write that into the offer. And you need to counsel them and say, okay, you know, maybe it's a $200,000 house that's only worth 185. And you write the 185 with 7,000 or 6,000 in concessions or whatever the number is. And the seller breaks and comes back. But again, there's ways to negotiate that. Now, as the market gets back to semi-normal, then we can do that. We can negotiate for these young kids. Last year, down here especially, and in the Tri-Lakes area, I know, maybe probably in your area too, but you couldn't get a concession for anybody. You'd have to add it on top, plus the 20,000 that you're gonna have to pay more, which was stupid. It was just stupid. You should be just joyful that we're not in that market anymore. All right, the next thing is earnest money. Now, do you need earnest money to make a contract in Missouri? No, the contract is considered goods, so you don't have to have it. So you'd think on $689,000, you'd be willing to put down some earnest money. She asked me how much earnest money I had to put down. I said, you don't have to put down anything if you don't want to. And I explained to her, and I'll explain to you quickly, and we'll cover it again. Once earnest money gets deposited, if you'll notice down there, it says no later than 5 days. I would change that to 10 if I had earnest money. But once it gets deposited, it's in that escrow account at the title company until hell freezes over, or you get a mutual release signed by both parties. Now, here's what happens. If we had had $10,000 down there and we went back 5 days later and said, hey, we want out, the seller would have said, okay, I'll take the earnest money. So here's what happens. Buyer asks, seller refuses and says, no, I want the earnest money. Okay, we don't have an agreement. That earnest money can stay in the escrow account for up to 365 days. And then, if you don't have an agreement, it gets sent to the state treasury. Goes to unclaimed funds. And then your buyer and seller say, whoa, we didn't know that was going to happen. We want it back. They have to send notarized letters signed by both parties saying we've reached an agreement on how to disperse the earnest money. Then the state will send it back to the title company. Then guess what you got to have? A mutual release signed by both parties to get it out. So, I mean, we fight about earnest money more than we do anything else. And I get it. You know, you've gone all the way through the inspection period, the contract's terminated, the contract clearly states that the earnest money should go back to the buyer, but the seller's upset. You know, they wanted to sell their house. The buyer decided they didn't want to buy it because of inspection issues. So they fight about the earnest money. It could be 500, it could be 200, it doesn't matter. They're going to fight about it. And so what you have to do, now you need to understand me on this. Your role in this is only to communicate, because this is between the seller and the buyer, and the title company. You don't have an escrow account at Keller Williams. Yay. It's the title companies that's holding your money, Mr. Seller. It's the title company that's holding your money, Mr. Buyer. You have to reach an agreement. And so 9 times out of 10, what I say to the agent is, we'll send it over again, asking for the same thing and see if they'll change your mind. If they send it back and say, no, the seller wants it all, then do a new mutual release that says 500 to the seller and 500 to the buyer. Let's see if we can work it out that way. Because number one, seller's been off the market, right? Even if it's a crap house after they get through the inspections, they've still been off the market. And you're out expenses for typically for the inspection at least. So, you know, maybe we can cover the cost of that, maybe we can't, but the deal is you need to move on because if you don't, the money's going to sit there forever. All right. So if we do have earnest money, then we'd send it to Hogan Land and Title. I wrote Hogan Land and Title in there anyway to let them know we were going to close. But look on 26 where it says you've got to get that money in within 5 days. I mean, that's like, you know, this weekend's Father's Day, right? Well, maybe you've got kids and you want to treat your dad and blah, blah, blah. And so you go to the lake on Friday. You've written a contract on Thursday, you go to lake on Friday, you're there Saturday, Sunday, you come back to church, then you gotta go visit your mama. Monday comes around. Next thing you know, you're on the 5th day. If you do not get that money deposited, your buyer doesn't get it deposited, then the contract can be terminated by the seller. And I'm not even clear on that because it says this. If earnest money is not timely delivered to escrow agent, the seller may terminate this contract by providing notice thereof to buyer at any time prior to delivery of the earnest money to escrow agent. So I'm almost thinking they could terminate the contract on the 4th day, right? Even if it says 5, what do you think? That's the way I read it. I think it's really not very clear there. So I always put 10 days in there and then I hound the buyer to death. I mean, I'll give them 1 day of rest, but after that, I'm like, did you deposit the earnest money? Did you deposit the earnest money? Did you deposit the earnest money? Well, I can't get down there. Well, all these title companies now can do it electronically. So, you know, if you want to do that, we can do that. But you got to get it in there because it really, if you don't, it leads to one, the seller could terminate the contract, but you could also be in a default issue for not following the terms and conditions of the contract. All right, this talks about additional earnest money. That's typically on new construction. Or let's say you've gone 60 days on a contract that's USDA or something like that. And they say, you know, we need another 10 days. And the seller goes, oh, heck no, I'm not doing that. And the buyer goes, you know what, I'll put down a little more money because it applies to the purchase anyway. But if you do that, there's a rider for that. And trust me, the Missouri realtors, the government, not government really, but the Missouri realtors, they've got a rider or a notice for everything. So you just have to find where it's at. All right, on closing, subject to the terms and conditions of this contract, the sale will be closed, which what does closing mean? The unconditional release and exchange of the deed for the purchase price, together with all the other documents and funds required by this contract. That's what a closing is. So a lot of times the buyer signs, the seller signs, funds aren't there. You don't have a closing yet. You shouldn't give possession. You shouldn't exchange your keys. Had this happen last week. It was really weird. It was Gershman Mortgage, but it was Hogan Land and Title. The seller was out of state. They sent the documents to him that said that they wouldn't release the funds until the next day. And I'm not sure why they did that. But if that happens, the agent called me, said, what do we do? Buyer didn't want to give possession. I said, you don't have to. You haven't had a closing yet. You've had 3 of the 4, but you don't have funds. If you don't have funds, you don't have a closing. It's not about commission. It's about paying off the note that the seller had, if he had one, and then the funds being released to the seller, and the buyer has brought all the funds. So the funding part of it is what a closing really is all about. The document signing, yay, we did all that. It takes forever, but it's the funds. That's what creates a closing. And you don't get paid. unless the funds are there, right? You as an agent? I told you guys you could ask questions, right? This is not like a silent deal. Okay? I didn't know if I told you that or not.
So,
All right. The next part is where are you gonna close? I don't care where you close. How many title companies you got up in Lebanon?
how many, I'm sorry,
Title companies?
3.
Three, okay. We got what? 500? I don't care where anybody closes. I don't like to be told where to close. You know, the old Solar prefers to close that. Yeah, right. You know, your best friends over there, you guys go out and drink martinis together. You know, if I see that, sometimes I put somebody else just because I don't want to mess with that. You know, I want them to do what I want to do. If it's a new construction though, and they say, we want to close at X, it's probably because that's where all their escrow accounts are for all their vendors that are working on the houses. And I'll close there in a minute because I understand that. It's a real pain for a builder to go one place and then close another place if it's new construction. But I close at 2 or 3, but I don't close at 10. And there's some I hate to close at, but if the other person writes it in there, I'm not gonna argue with it because what do I want to do? Close, yeah. I don't get paid until you get closed. My buyer doesn't get the house. The seller doesn't sell. I mean, it's kind of a mess. So I'm not gonna argue about it unless they're trying to force me to do it and I'm the one writing the contract. I might go, Anyhow, Hogan Land and Title on Sunshine, I like using them because they've been in business for 60 or 70 years, you know? So I kind of trust people who've been around a long time. But I close at other title companies too. And the one thing I want from a title company is respect. When I walk into Meridian over there, and I'm closing over there, it's over on Republic Road, everybody loves Meridian, okay? If I'm with the other agent, they hug the other agent and they don't even know who the heck I am. That makes me mad. I've been in business 27 years. I mean, you know, it's like a cult deal. I'm like, okay, I am not closing there. And I've never written a contract to close a Meridian for that reason. I want to be respected and recognized. If I'm the one that they've been talking to me for 45 days on this transaction, then they better recognize me when I walk in the building. That's important, I think, right?
Right.
You're going to be doing 200 contracts a year up there?
You hope.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
With 10
You will with
people,
11
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're going to be doing 200 a year. If you're going to be doing 200 a year, you want to be recognized, especially by, if there's 3 of them,
Uh-huh.
they better all say, hey, it's that group over there, Avenue Home, you know, or Jim Bolin. All right, so I'm going to close here. It's on Sunshine Street. If they have multiple locations, you have to name an address. You don't have to give the exact address, but you got to tell what street it's on. And then in Springfield, Missouri, and then the date on closing. All right. We'd all like to close in 7 days, wouldn't we? Then we get paid. Everything's done. We don't have to worry about it. There's not as much stress. Never happens. It happens rarely. So you ask your buyer, right? When do you want to close? The buyer goes, well, we'd like to close in 10 days. But you ask the lender and the lender says, we can't do it for 30. It's got to be at least 30. And most of the lenders now on FHA, VA, they can still do 30 days. Conventional, sometimes they can do a little less than that, but it still takes a little bit of time. USDA used to be 60, no matter what. So you've got to ask the lender too, and hopefully you're having conversations with that lender as you're working with the buyer. Even if it's just by email, you've got to ask the right questions. So they may want to close on July 14th, but the lender may say, can't happen. You know, today is June 14th, right? Not going to happen. Basically 30 days, it's going to take at least 35. So you need to write that for whatever. But you ask both people, right? And then with the buyer, especially first-time home buyers, if you're working with them, if they're in an apartment, you've already had the conversation, right? Are you in a lease? And they go, yeah. When's it in? September. Okay. Have you talked to the property management company or the owner? Can you get out of your lease? And if you can't get out of your lease, we probably ought to wait till August before we start writing this thing. Or can you buy your way out of the lease? Or whatever it might be. But this date is really dictated by the lender and the buyer. I'll show you here. We actually called the agent and had her check. So when do they want to move? Because they were moving to Florida. And she said July 14th, but you'll see, I'm going to show you a counter here in a minute. They actually changed it, decided they wanted the 21st. Okay, this is important. Even if you don't have earnest money, where am I going to close? You need somebody that does their job. Now, as soon as we go under contract, what do you do as a buyer's agent? What's your first job? You're under contract.
Send it to the title and the lender.
Send it to the title and the lender. Now, it's really the listing agent's job is to send it to the, but don't ever trust anybody. You know, get the documents over there. The other thing is you need to find out who you're closing with. I've specified who I'm closing with here, but you need to find out who that closer is. Who's going to be assigned this file? And if you're using command, put them in there. And if you're using .loop, put them in there. You'll see that all those people are in there, emails and phone information, so I don't have to dig around for that stuff when I've got a question that needs to be answered. Okay, so that's part of your job too. Possession and all keys be delivered to buyer at closing. Brokers are not responsible for the delivery of keys. That's horse poop. We do it all the time. I mean, we always do. If we're working with the sellers, we bring the keys and the garage door openers. Buyers should change locks following possession, reset the factory setting all codes and passwords for all electronic systems. I agree with that. My mother-in-law, when we sold her house, there could have been 100 keys out in the community. So before we ever sold it, we rekeyed the property, all the doors. That's a great closing gift. You want to give a closing gift? Don't change the knobs and all that. Get somebody to rekey. That means they just rekey it. It's a lot less expensive. But make a big deal out of it. You know, like, here's one of the things that I did for you, and I want you to understand this is very important, you know. For your security and safety, I've had all of the blocks rekeyed. Here's a new set of keys just for you. I mean, make a big deal out of it.
So you said it's our responsibility to send the paperwork to the loan officer and to the escrow.
Mhm.
So what is that, this that we send
The
the
contract,
contract in?
all, well, and it's not gonna be all parts of the contract, but it's gonna be the contract. Don't send them disclosures, don't send them agency documents. Don't send them, well, if there's HSA or a warranty or CHASA or whatever, you'd send that along with it, but you've got to get that over to the lender.
So is this contract?
Basically, the 8 pages is the main thing.
Pretty much just this, and then we're good. Send it.
But, so what I do, scan it, I send an email, put in primary contact, and this is me. Here's my phone number, here's my email, even though it's in the email address. Here's a buyer, here's their phone number, here's their email. Here's the second buyer, here's their phone number, here's their email. Here's the seller's name. I don't have their email. You'll need to contact the other agent. Here's the other agent, here's their phone number, here's their email. Here's the lender, here's their phone number, here's their email. And I send that all over in one package. And then rarely, but every once in a while I get a call and go, hey, could you send me the buyer's name or whatever it might be? And I'm like, holy shit, I already did this, but I've got the email, you know, and I create a file up in Gmail for that transaction. So it's right there. So all I got to do is type in Linda and it pops up. And I see the email that I sent on that date and I just resend it.
And so once you send this, is it the whole loan stuff is just between the client and then at that point, so all you gotta do is send it over?
Yes, but don't trust lenders either. You know, there's good realtors and there's bad realtors, and there's good lenders and there's bad lenders. And even if they've got a team, there's still bad ones. So I'm hounding them, you know. I don't hound them every day, but once a week I'm checking in. And the good ones now are sending me emails, which is I'm like shocked. And they go, here's where we are. There's a girl down here, I think she's Gershwin, maybe. Satterley is the last name. And I mean, she sends video, you know, which I like that. I mean, I don't watch it. But I know my client does, you know. That's really important. They know exactly where they're at in the transaction, because this is, look, once you start doing this, you get busy, it's old hat. But to that buyer, that may be the first house they've ever bought, or the first one in 10 or 20 years, or for the seller, you know, they may have lived on that farm for 30 years. So they don't know all this stuff. So anything you can get, it kind of eases that. And I don't know what goes on behind the scene at the lender's office. You know, who has a clue? I don't understand why they get paid, but they don't understand why we get paid either. We get more than they do. And title companies, They charge you $200 for a closing. You think, how are they getting paid? Well, it's the insurance side. You know, that's where they get paid, and, you know, they make lots of money.
You said you use like dot loop. So I know where you're coming from because I thought the same thing at first. Dot loop, you can add all your information in and then send it to the client and then they can sign it through your dot loop. So all your whole transaction can basically be done through that. You can scan their paperwork in or just send it to them. And it's like a fill in the blanks type
It's called
thing.
dot loop.
Dot loop
Or DocuSign.
or DocuSign is.
DocuSign is what the majority of Keller Williams is using now. I'm just old.
And it's through the MLS through Flex, I think, is DocuSign.
No,
Or
Flex
that's,
is,
Oh, I don't know.
Simply Sign, isn't it?
I think I've
I've
heard
used
that.
both and they're both great, like.
Yeah.
You, and then you'll always have your client
Documents.
informations, your documents, your title, company's information.
And they're in the cloud. So you never lose them,
Yeah, they're
which in
always
the
there.
past, I mean, you go up in my office right now, I got 2 file cabinets in the back room and that crap. And I still do paper, I print paper on everything. But my partner, Lene, she doesn't print anything. I have to tell her to print it. She doesn't even take MLS sheets when she's showing property. She just takes her iPad.
That's me.
You know? But most people, they like stuff, don't they?
Mhm.
So I hand it to them. She doesn't get it. She's young. But the deal is, no matter what you use as your electronic signature platform, all of them save it. You just get the one you like, whichever one you like. That loop we used at Keller Williams here now for right at 10 years. But Keller Williams got mad because Zillow bought them. And Zillow, notorious for capturing every bit of the names, addresses and everything, and then using that to market. And they sell the data to other people and things like that. I'm just too lazy to switch. Now, Lene, my partner, is using DocuSign and Command now on a regular basis. But I hate to relearn stuff when I get this old, you know, it's kind of hard.
So and before this, wouldn't there be, you have to get the exclusive buyers
Mhm.
things. That's a whole separate document.
Right.
So, yeah,
So
I'm
the
really
process
impressed.
is this. Hi, Jim Bolin.
Hi.
What's your name again?
Nick
Nick, what's your last name?
Cofield.
You want to buy a house, right?
Yeah.
I'm your man. All right. So I don't normally sign a exclusive agency with the buyer when I first meet him. And the reason I don't do it is, and I've always had this from the beginning, from 1996 when buyer's agency came. I might not want to work with Nick. So what I'll do is I'll meet with them. I'll talk about agency and those things like that, and then I'll show them some property. And if they're unreasonable, I just fire them. You know, I just want them to go work with somebody else. You know, you and I just don't communicate very well, or if they don't trust me. You know, and you can sense that pretty quickly. I don't want to work with them. So, yes, so I show him a couple of houses. He doesn't necessarily like them, but, you know, we come back to the office and we sit down or we go to a McDonald's or whatever. And I say, you know what, we really need to enter into an exclusive agreement. And here's the reason. Missouri requires me to provide you with the Missouri broker disclosure form. And in that form, it says that if you want representation of the state of Missouri, we've got to have a signed contract. It's not going to cost you anything. Typically, the seller will pay my commission. So it's not going to cost you anything, but that puts us together. We're on the same team. We're looking for properties. I'm responsible for finding you what you need. So, I mean, I think it's a good idea and we can discuss it more, but you know, what do you think of that idea? And he goes, you know, I want to sign no contract or I don't care. I just want to buy a house. That's typically what they say.
Mhm.
So how do you get that contract?
How do you get it?
Yeah.
You go into the buyer's exclusive agency. You would go into Form Simplicity on the MLS, drop-down menu, and you could type in exclusive and it'll come up with all the exclusive forms. You could go into DocuSign once you've received the training, and they've got all the forms in there in packages for a buyer. .loop, but you wouldn't want to do it because you have to pay for .loop, you know, so don't do that. Command or DocuSign's free. I'm paying for it, but DocuSign's free. Form Simplicity is free too. All right, so what they're going to have though, if you went into DocuSign, like you go to a class, even if it's a Zoom class with Nicole, they'll have packages. So you got the buyer's exclusive agency, which is exclusive right to purchase is what it's called. Okay. You'll also have the Missouri broker disclosure form. You'll typically have maybe a home warranty. You have the affiliated referral of business. And
Basically,
I think that would
one
be it.
Folder.
yeah, it's in a folder.
And so you have like your buyer side and then you have like your seller side.
So it's all kind of packaged over.
Yes, it's super
Yeah.
nice because it's really
It's
just
easy.
everything you need right there.
Like when I joined, when I first started selling real estate with Remax, they charged me $1/4 a page for the contracts. I was really careful. $1/4 a page, that still is back when they had NCR copies, that's how old I am, so.
Things have got much easier.
I can't believe it. So the first contract I wrote was with Michael Bays. He was a doctor, ENT surgeon down in Branson. I showed him a couple of houses and he decided he liked one, wanted to buy it. So I met him at the office after he got off work and we sat down. I said, okay, I've never done this before. I said, so we're going to read it line by line. 3 hours. It took me 3 hours. Okay. You don't want to do that. That's why you go to this class and then you study this and you're prepared so you don't have to read each line.
And sorry for all the questions. So this is an offer.
This is an offer.
Okay.
Yeah. Residential sale contract. So we're making an offer on a property. It's funny that I'm glad you said that because again, when you do it so often, we don't think about those things. So you have exclusive right to purchase and exclusive right to sell, 2 separate contracts. They look exactly the same. Some of the wording is different. So those are the agency contracts that you enter into. So Nick and I we can be working together and I will actually have a fiduciary responsibility because I've entered into a contract with him. I'm the only one that he's supposed to work with when it comes to buying real estate. And then if I have one with Amanda on selling a property, I have an exclusive right to sell, then she and I are the only ones. She can't go over to Nick and say, hey, Nick, I want you to try to market my property. No, that's an ethical issue. You don't want to do that. So that's why we enter into them. What it used to be was exclusive agency. Exclusive agency means anybody can represent them. I've got a contract, you've got a contract, you've got a contract. You just go up to Buffalo, and Buffalo, that whole area up there, practice exclusive. There'd be 6 signs in the yard. Whoever got the contract was the winner. The rest of the people didn't get paid. If you have an exclusive right to sell, you're going to get paid no matter who buys it. Whether you sell it or it doesn't matter. That's what you want, exclusive right to on those. So this is the purchase offer of the contract. All right, so here it says attach a right or a possession to be transferred other than at closing. And so there's 3. The lease thing, I'm not going to go into that because it's a little bit confusing. And if you get to that point, you can call me or you can talk to your mentor. But possession by buyer prior to closing, possession by seller after closing, and the limited purpose entry by buyer prior to closing. Possession by buyer prior to closing, bad idea. It's like buying a used car. They get in there and the toilet won't flush properly or whatever it might be, even though they've had inspections. Possession by seller after closing. If I give you $100,000 for a house, I want my house. I don't want you in it. But sometimes people ask, I love this one. And I used it last week, limited purpose entry. Here's the thing. We're asking somebody to move. This was in Willard. From a 3,000 square foot house into a 2,500 square foot house in 1 day. So the other house was vacant. So I asked the agent, I said, please ask if they would consider giving us limited purpose entry prior to closing so we can move boxes. So if we can just move all our boxes, then this mover comes in, he can move all the furniture in 3 to 4 hours, right? Most of the time. If all the boxes are gone, the little stuff. And so we got it and she had a full week to move her boxes in there. And so she did. And then it took 3 hours to move her out of her house. And then the sellers got to take possession within hours. She started moving at 8 o'clock, was done by noon, and we had our closing at noon, and they just moved right in. I love this one. You sell a farm, you better use that one. Because how many cows can you move in 1 day? How many tractors? How many trailers? How many rings? If you're moving all that stuff, you know, and then back to farms, back to the included, excluded. You know, anybody's ever been on a farm, you see the big metal gates, those aren't included in the sale. That's personal property.
I have a question.
Okay.
So I have a listing coming up and it's a horse barn, it's land.
Yep.
So we can use this same exact form, say she can, or somebody buys it and they need to start moving their horse stuff in, we can use that for land also? Is that-
Yeah,
or-
I mean, and here's the deal, it should be on both sides. So your person that's selling, unless they're selling all of their equipment, wherever they're going, they may need the same thing on the other side, so you can actually counsel maybe their agent, say, you know, let's see if you can do that. What we did at we sold in Miller, we moved 20 head of cows because they had they had fence and cross fence. We moved 20 head of cows the week before, because you just can't, if you're loading them in a trailer, for cows, you can't get 20 of them in there. I guess you could, depend on the size. If they were little bitty cows, you could. And if you don't have a big 40-foot trailer, it's going to take you a while. So we got to move 90%, I think, maybe even 100% of all the equipment to the farm in Miller before we ever closed. And then we closed and they could start farming. But again, back to those gates, they're expensive, right? Anybody farm? How much are they now? Are they 30, 40, 50? What do they cost? The big
Big one, like close to 100.
$100? Okay,
Yeah.
$100. When you go on farms with fence and cross fence, there might be 20 of those. So if you want them, you need to include them. And you may get some pushback from the farmer, who knows, because they're gonna take them and do something with them, and you'll see them stacked outside their barn for the next 10 years. Point is, that's just like a refrigerator. All right, so everybody understands limited purpose entry? Yes? Okay, good. I want you to think about that one, because if the other house is vacant, all I want is a little section of the garage. I don't want to go in the house. I'm not going to move any furniture, refrigerators, nothing. I'm not going to do anything. I just need to get my boxes there if I'm in, especially if you're close. I'm 45. Unless specified otherwise, seller warrants the property to be vacant at the time of closing. And it's got tenants and leases and all that stuff. But look what it says on 47. Ordinary wear and tear accepted and free of any debris or personal property not included above. So you're supposed to go to the house and it's supposed to have all the personal property gone. It's crazy what you see sometimes. I mean, they'll be clothes in the closet, just stuff. That's why you want to do a walkthrough. If you can do a walkthrough, you need to do it, and you need to make sure it's gone. So if it's excessive, I mean, if they got some clothes in the car, they got some stuff on the floor of the garage or whatever, I'll just take care of it myself. But I mean, if they got tables and chairs and, kids stuff, whatever it might be, I'm calling the agent immediately, shooting pictures. I'm saying, look, we got to get this taken care of. We're closing in 3 hours. The house is a wreck. It's got all this personal property in it. Can you make arrangements? If you can't, then we'll need compensation to get it done. And then I'll call We Move or My Move or somebody and say, come get this junk and get it out of here. But to me, it's important that you do that. But notice it doesn't say anywhere in there, clean. Now, if you've been in it 27 years, I've mopped, dusted, swept, wiped cabinets, cleaned toilets. I mean, I've done it all because I just hate for my clients to walk in there and see that, that somebody just didn't care enough. So don't be surprised. And I've got clients that, man, they'll slip it up, like the lady in Willard that we did the limited purpose entry. She had a professional cleaner go to her house and a professional cleaner go to the house she was buying, All right, so we got through one page. It's only 10:15. That wasn't one. It's important that you understand that page. The first 3 pages are really critical, so it's good that we get those. All right, so we sell appraisal financing contingencies. Either the contract on page 2 on 51 is not contingent upon the sale and closing of another property, or it is. If it is, then you must include the rider. You've got to include the rider, whichever one it is. Now, there's two parts to this. If it's contingent on the sale and closing, then that house may not even be on the market yet. So is that a strong offer? No, it's not. If the house is on the market, it's only been on the market a couple days, then you ask 1,000 questions. You know, what's the MLS? What kind of activity have you had? Do you think it'll sell quickly? You know, they could be in Bend, Oregon or something, you know? But you've got to ask all those questions so that you can counsel your seller as to whether to take it or not. And you're trying to strengthen, if you're representing the buyer's side, you're trying to strengthen and say, okay, you know, we're going to go in here with this contingency for the sale. You know, we need to price your house right? So you may want 200,000, but we might want to price it at 190, see if we can't get it moved quickly. You know, if this is the house of your dreams type of stuff. So either way, you've got to include this. Now, I think contingent upon the close of a property is a great offer, especially if you've been through inspections. If you got through inspections already, all that's left is the lending stuff. So that's a good offer, but the riders are very clear. They tell you how to go on that. And, you know, if you're going to make an offer that's contingent, if your seller says, I do have a house to sell, and your first question should be, is it listed? If they say, no, it's not listed, I said, you know, when do you want me to come by and take care of that? Because it would strengthen your offer if you're on the market. It would strengthen a lot more if you're under contract. Well, I don't want to sell and have no place to go. Well, if that's the case, then, you know, let's talk about that, but let's think about getting your property on the market. Let's get the paperwork done. We can discuss some options. One might be contingent upon you finding the house within 7 days. We'll put that right in the MLS. So somebody can come by your house, but you've got to find another house. But in a lot of cases, they found the house, but they weren't quite on the market. I love those, don't you? Get to list it, get to work with a buyer.
I'm in one right now.
There you go. I love those. As long as I get control of both sides, I'm in good shape. Everybody understand that? The two riders. Okay. And then the appraisal contingency, I always check that box, except here. And I'll tell you the reason I did. 56 acres, all perimeter fenced, had a live creek, had a pond, had a live spring, 4,000 square foot home, 2 levels, slick as a whistle, shop, 40 by 100 or something like that, concrete, conduit, compressor, all in there, drive-through doors for an RV. I mean, the house is worth $689. I don't have to worry about the appraisal. I've seen enough property to know this is fine. And they didn't care anyway. The buyers didn't. I mean, you know, it's a dream home until 5 days later. But I always check that and then go down to line 63. And whatever the number of days in the contract, that's what you should put in that day, in that box right there. Because appraisers don't come in 25 days typically. They come in 5 days before closing, whenever it is. So if you've got a 45-day contract, I'd put 45 days in there. Because if it comes in the last week and it doesn't appraise, then you should deliver a notice, that's MSC 2020N on line 64, to the seller's agent, saying, unfortunately, the house, we wrote the offer for $689, it appraised at $650. We'd like for you to reduce the price to $650. And the seller goes, oh, hell no, I ain't doing that, blah, blah, blah. So the options are the seller, if it doesn't appraise, reduces the price to the appraisal price because you've got it marked as a contingency in the contract. You split the difference, okay? Buyer pays a little more than the appraised price, seller comes down a little bit. Buyer pays the $689, forgets about the appraisal. Or the contract's terminated without penalty to the buyer. I always want that, even if you're working with an investor and they find $40,000 houses, I always check the box, because if the bank says, we're gonna do an appraisal on this. And they go out and say, hey buddy, this is only worth 35,000. If I can get 5,000 less for my investor, I'm protecting him. That's my job, right? Okay, so line 64 has what? Term of the contract. Line 64 has what? Term of the contract, whatever that is, 45 days, 60 days, whatever. Don't guess. If it closes in 45 days, then put 45 in there. Without that, if you go past that appraisal deadline, let's say we wrote this for 689, we didn't check the box for appraisal, it comes in and appraises at 589. Hey, I mean, I have really screwed over my clients. Well, I haven't, but we can argue about the appraised value. It doesn't matter. I mean, they're paying $100,000 more than what the bank or somebody, a professional appraiser, said it should appraise for. That'd be a bad deal, wouldn't it? Okay. All right, and then we have the appraisal resolution deadline. We want that to be 5 days because we don't want to give the seller very much time. We want to say, look, it didn't appraise. We need for you to do something. Tell us what you're going to do so we can either move forward or not. On financing contingencies, it's either not contingent on financing. And if you look there, it says, although not a condition of performance, the buyer may finance any portion. This lady's got $4 million in O'Reilly stock. So she could cash $689,000 pretty easy, right? What she wanted to do was borrow against the stock, which I thought I'd do that. I mean, I've got some investments where I just call the guy and say, I need X. And he goes, okay, I'll get you a check tomorrow. They were going to charge her 12% to borrow against her stocks. And I called a financial planner and said, are you sure about that? He goes, yeah, that's what they said. And I say, geez, I think she'd get a loan at a bank cheaper than that, using her stocks as security, which she's at 7%. So, and she doesn't, it's not that, she's got a house that's free and clear. So when she sells that, she's going to offset the cost. But point is, she might still finance this even though she's got the money to just cash it out and pay it. And most investors check that box. Non-conventional, this is any government loan. And if you check this box, you must have a rider. If you check this box, you must have a rider. Okay. That's VA, FHA, USDA, any type of government loan. And then on conventional, that's a 95% or less loan. So I'm putting down at least 5% cash, and it's not a government-backed security. Could be an in-house loan at a bank, could be anything. But on that, again, we're on line 80, the loan contingency deadline, which is, that should be the term of the contract. So you want to write, if it's 45 days, you put 45 in there. If it's 50, you put 50, because the same thing as the appraisal. Lenders do not kick out a loan 10 days into the contract. You know when they kick it out? The last week. They call you and go, Jimmy bought a truck and he can't afford it anymore. His debt to income's too high. And I'm like, oh. Well, if I've got this marked, I just get them to send me, a denial letter, and I send it to the other agent and say, man, I'm sorry. I know the people have already fixed everything and they moved out of the house and they're living in Oregon now, but here we are. This is what it is. If I don't do that, if you look at line, let me find it, 95, if the loan contingency deadline passes without a termination, buyer remains obligated under this contract and must have available all funds required to close. This is even on government loans. Those people, they're having to get a 96.5% loan on an FHA, but it still says you've got to have the funds. Really what it does, the contract is basically saying, now you're in default. We can sue you. All right, let's go back up to these boxes. It says, what are you getting for your loan? Is it a percentage of the purchase price, or is it this much money? The initial interest rate not to exceed, amortization term, rate type, fixed, adjustable, or other. This is really important for government loans especially, but especially newer buyers. that you put in, like if it's FHA, you know it's a 3.5% loan, right? So you put in 96.5. You don't have to fill in the other blank, man. But interest rate not to exceed. So you ask the lender, okay, what, if the interest rate is currently 6.5, if it goes to 7, can they still buy? And if he goes, no, they can't buy if it goes to 7. Their debt to income will be too high. You need to put 6.5 in that blank. Right? Because the interest rates have only gone up for the last 9 or 10 months, 11 months, whatever it is. They've just gone up. They haven't, I mean, they've dropped down for a day or two, but they go back up again. So if you don't, your buyer doesn't have an option. If it goes from 6.5 to 8, they're still going to have to buy the house, and they can't. So protect them there. Ask the lender, what interest rate will be too high for them? It's a simple question. If any decent lender will say, if it went to 7, it's too high. 7.25 would be too much. Amortization terms typically go about 30 years, and rate type's going to be fixed on 95%, maybe 98%. Now, last recession we were in, man, they were selling adjustables left and right, but we're not in a recession. Not a true recession yet. We're receding. We're just not there yet. And then on other terms on 80, I just said, look back at line 72 where I told you, she doesn't have to do it. But you'll need to fill this out. Do not put, listen to me, TBD. There's no protection for your client. To be determined, to be determined, to be determined. That's no protection. You need to have honest conversations with your client and the lender and figure out what to put in those blanks. And if you fill out like on 87, I said, if you fill out the first one, you don't have to fill out the second. MRAC doesn't like blanks left blank. We good? You're going to protect your clients with the loan contingency deadline, and you're going to fill out those blanks. All right, on 6, on title and survey, any seller paid title fees set forth below or in addition to any concession. So if they, even though there's concessions of 5,000 or 6,000 by the seller, that's not paying his title fees. His title fees are separate from that, as is the home warranty, and that's all in there. But the seller shall transfer marketable title to the property subject to the permitted exceptions as directed by buyer, unless otherwise specifically agreed. A general warranty deed, which is what we use in the state of Missouri if we want a strong deed, properly executed and in recordable form. So we send that contract to the title company. They need to get to work right then doing the title work. They need to do a search immediately, because the problem is there are lots of liens out there. There's liens for child support. There's liens for federal and state taxes. There's seconds. There's all kinds of stuff out there. There's mechanic liens. We need to know about that. And if it's a property like this one, and we didn't have a survey, which we did, you want to know about boundary disputes, right? You want to know about easements that go through the property for natural gas or electric, even though the poles aren't in yet. They could just drop one right there in front of your house if they wanted to. And it could be one of those big double deals where you can't build anything under it for 100 feet on either side. So you want to know all that. So I put 10 days on there because I want the title company to go to work pretty quick. And that's paid for by the seller. Now you get 4 choices here on who pays what. I think it should be fair and balanced. So I always check C. I'm going to give you a title commitment. I'm the seller. I'm going to pay for that, but you're going to pay for your own buyer's policy to insure the title, because who benefits from that? The buyer. So if the buyer benefits, the buyer should pay for it. All the rest of those, A and B, cost the seller more money. In A, the seller's paying everything. On B, he's splitting the cost of the buyer's insurance policy. Well, I don't know. It could be $1,000 on a house like this. It might be a couple $1,000, might be $3,000 if they're insuring the loan amount. $689,000. It could be a big number. I think it's fair that the seller deliver a clear title and that the buyer pay for his own cost. But if you wanted to sweeten it, and you were working for the buyer, you could put in there on D that the buyer can order a title commitment to issue an owner's policy, both at buyer's cost. Because a title commitment doesn't cost very much money. Not as much as the buyer's owner policy. So that would make your offer look really good. And you could tell the other agency, look, we're willing to pay those costs for you. But it's not thousands of dollars, so probably check with the title company, see how much it's going to be. And then who's going to do the title commitment and the owner's policy? I want the same title company we're going to close that to do the title work. Doesn't make any sense to anything else. Look at 107, it says buyer at its own sole option, expense and liability may also obtain a survey of the property to confirm the legal description, determine if there are any defects, encroachments, overlaps, boundary line or acreage discrepancies, or other adverse matters that may be discussed. Okay, so you're not going to get you're not going to get, it says 25 days default, right? Or 20. Buyer has 20 days to review the title commitment, which really basically it might include the survey. So you're going to put 45 days in there. I would, or to the term. And you can't get a survey in 45 days, hardly, can you? I mean, maybe, but I doubt it. So you may have to, if you're looking at that, if you need a survey, you might write your initial contract for a longer time and then put that same number in there. But here's what happens. So if we go to the next page, what it talks about in that whole paragraph is that, look, if we find discrepancies, we want them corrected before closing, then the seller has to do them. So we'll send to him whatever the discrepancies are, boundary disputes, easements. Maybe we were buying 56 acres and it turned out it was 51. So I send to the seller a rider or a notice and it says, we want this corrected prior to closing. 119 says the seller has 7 days after receipt of the buyer's objections to settle that. And so I want it settled quickly. I want the seller to say, I'll fix it. Or I'll give you compensation. If you pay, we figure the acreage is worth $4,000 an acre, then I want compensation. So it's, what I said, 56, 50. 6 acres less than what you said it was, then I want $24,000 off the price. Okay? If he doesn't, contract terminates. Now, if I paid for a survey, the buyer, remember, ordered the survey, and the contract gets terminated, the seller is now responsible for the survey. Got that? Now, how are you gonna get your money? You're probably gonna have to go small claims, but you're gonna ask for it and say, look, it cost me $3,500 for that survey. Mr. Seller, per the contract, you need to pay for that. Hopefully this never happens. But there are remedies within the contract, and that's the reason we cover them. That's the only reason. So that's everything down to 134.
What did you say for 119? The seller has how many days? Was it still 7? Did you recommend it?
I leave 7 or shorter. The 7 is plenty. Look, he knows because I've been talking to the agent, or I may be even talking to the seller. We've done the survey and look, you thought you owned all the way down here and where your fence line is, but you don't own that. That's actually belongs to that person over there. I've been farming it probably for 50. Well, you can dispute it if you want, but here's what it says we're buying. This is what the survey says. You can get another survey if you want to. However, we want that, if it's 10 acres, we want that price reduced to that amount. And, here it is in writing, and you've got 7 days to respond and make a decision. And you see this, there's actually Missouri fence laws, and you can look those up. So there are some issues, there's some laws there that you can look up, and they're pretty clear, saying, if it's been in existence or who's responsible and all that. And I forget how they go, but if the guy's got cattle on one side and the line is supposed to be moved, it's got to be moved 10 feet in, then whoever's got the cows, if the other person doesn't have cows, has to move it and has to pay for it. But you look it up. I'm not an expert in that for sure. All right, inspections. Now, obviously, I'm not going to stop for you to go to the bathroom. So if you want to go to the bathroom, you got to do it on your own. Okay. Right?
Duly noted.
Yeah. This is one of those that goes on forever. Inspections. Look what the first line is. The property is being sold in its present condition. It's as is, isn't it? That's really what it says. It goes on to say, with no warranties expressed or implied except as may be given to buyer in writing, conditions of the property that are disclosed or clearly visible should be considered by buyer in setting the purchase price, or by making correction of such conditions by seller or requirement of the contract. So, I mean, if I walk up to a house and the glass is broken in the door, I'm writing it in the offer. Seller repair the glass in the door, or replace the door or whatever. And if I walk in and there's a hole in the ceiling, I'm writing in the offer. I'm not waiting for the inspector to find those things. And if I walk in and my seller says, this carpet in this back bedroom, the dogs have chewed it up and all that, you wanna write? I'm writing it in the contract because property is being sold in its present condition. I don't want it in its present condition. My buyer doesn't want it in its present condition. We'll give you a full price to fix these things. Okay? Because you're still gonna have an inspection, right? And the inspector, what is he doing? He's finding all the stuff that you can't see. Or leaking plumbing, crawl space issues, attic issues, roof issues, electric issues, whatever they might be. I'm not an expert in those areas. I really am.
So where would you actually write in the things that you want fixed? Is there a designated?
In the purchase offer. So when I go to special agreements, which is on page 6 or 7, I think, I'm gonna go in there and write those in. And if I have to, if it's a laundry list, I'm gonna attach a Word document and call it Exhibit A. Because there might be a laundry list. Now, here's one of the things I will warn you about. In the winter, agents are notorious for showing the house. You know what I mean? They never walk outdoors. And you should always walk around a house. I mean, you should just do it because, you know, look how pretty I am from the front, but if I turn around, whoo, I mean, there's some bad, you know what I mean? And that's how it is sometimes. Some things look good up front, but then you start digging deeper and all of a sudden on the backside, you know, they got gutters falling off and windows broken and rotted decks and all kinds of stuff. But agents are notorious for showing the house and not really looking at the house as a whole. And you should, you know, when they do it, when it's cold, when it's raining, and when it's hot. And when they've got spiky heels on. Realtors shouldn't really wear spiky heels. We've had a bunch of them here.
I can't walk in those.
I
Yeah,
can't.
mine don't fit anymore.
I bury up just in a minute. So, I mean, I agree with you, but yeah, I've got some agents that used to work here. Now they've got, they're over at Jim Garland's office, they're twin sisters. I didn't have spike cancel. They're not showing property, they're showing the house, aren't they? And they're parking close to the house. They're not parking at the end of the driveway. What about trees hanging over a house? I mean, same thing, I still write that up, you know, seller to remove or cut the limbs or trim the limbs or whatever it might be if I think it's a danger. I mean, because of that paragraph, I'm more cautious than ever about writing the offer. Okay, that paragraph goes on to say that the buyer can have it inspected. Now, here's what it basically says. It can be inspected for anything. But you know who can do the inspection according to this paragraph? The buyer. Yeah, they could hire me. That would be a bad deal. But the buyer can do his own inspection. It says anybody that the buyer selects, and even if they call it qualified, he's the one that determines who's qualified or not. You're going to get somebody who decides they're going to inspect their own house. If they decide they're going to inspect their own house and they want to provide an inspection notice, they have to provide an inspection report, even if it's handwritten. Okay? So if it happens, it happens. And the buyer can actually select anybody to appraise it. That'd be good. Get your competitive realtor to appraise it. Get the seller's agent to appraise it. It's going to appraise, isn't it? All right, on B, on 7, property data. This, I mean, other brokers don't like this when I say it, but I call this a buyer remorse paragraph. What it says is if you put a number in there, 5 days if nothing's stated, The buyer has 5 days to review additional data. Now, I give some specifics like sex offenders, square footage, land improvement, school district taxes. But you know what else is included? Paint color. I don't like the drive. I don't like the driveway. The trees have those little pokey things, the balls that fall out of them. You know what I'm talking about? It doesn't matter what it is. In 5 days, all they got to do is send you an email that per the data period, we've decided to terminate the contract. After reviewing additional data, but it doesn't say where the data comes from. Your mother-in-law comes over and goes, oh my God, why would you pay that for this house? So I can tell you, if as a listing agent, if they put 5 or 7 or whatever in there, I'm out, I'm countering it, I'm going back to 0. And the other brokers go, well, you're not even off on a true contract. I'm like, you know, I don't care what you say. I think that's just one more way where the buyer can get out without penalty for not really any specific reason. Now, if a buyer came to me and I'm the listing agent and said, look, buyer's agent, there's a sex offender living across the street. My client has 2 small daughters, and that's exactly what he did. It wasn't a 16-year-old in Nebraska that, you know, he kissed when he was 18. These are, you know, he molested small children. We want out. I'd be like, you're out, buddy. You know, I don't care what my sellers say, you know, you're out. That's different, you know, and I tell my clients, you know, if you're concerned with those things, then, you know, you need to do your research. And here's a Missouri Highway Patrol website in Greene County and Pulaski County or whatever. They have databases with those people in them. And you can see right where they live. I've got one within a mile of me. It's a mile in Springfield's a long ways, you know what I mean? He wouldn't dare come to my house. But that data period, I just don't like it because you can just get out and it's, you know, no penalty. All right, C, so you do what you want to. I'm putting 0, like as you can see here. On inspection reports, again, basically all it says, you can get any inspection you want. I don't care, foundation, air quality, roof, windows, you could have a window inspection, you could have anything you wanted. The dumbest one the most interesting one I ever had was I put a house under contract in downtown Springfield, and this lady wanted to have an inspection for spirits, evil spirits. And I'm like, okay, well, who are we gonna get to do that? And anyhow, we got this person who could determine if evil spirits were in the house. And she came in her flowing gowns and all this, wearing 700 pounds. She didn't really weigh that, but big woman, danced around, did all this stuff, and chanted a lot. Yeah, she had like stuff going on. Incense and all that.
Sage.
That was before marijuana was allowed. We probably would have done that too. Anyhow, she goes, oh, I'm determined that there are evil spirits in this house. And, you know, I'm sorry. I said, well, how do we get rid of them? She said, well, we can have a seance or we can pray. And I said, hell, let's have that. We'll pray them spirits out of here right now. She didn't think that was funny. They didn't buy the house. I mean, I was just like, God, I've heard something. And I fired the buyer. I just, you know, there's evil spirits in all houses, right? I read somewhere the other day that most of your life, you're within 5 to 10 foot of a spider at all times. Right? Spiders are evil.
That's evil.
Yeah. So they're always there, no matter what you do. It ain't the kind of evil spirits that jump down on you or ghost you or anything like that. I lived in this house one time that had ghosts. I'll keep this very brief. Aurora, Missouri. I taught in Stillville, and my next job was in Aurora. I coaching and teaching. I bought this house, and it belonged to a lady that they owned an EMT service, but they also were undertakers. What do you call it?
Morticians?
Yeah, mortician. So she's showing me the house. I'm walking through it. There's this pink room in the back. She opens the door. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? You know, we tried to have a baby, we couldn't have one. Her husband died on an EMT trip, had a heart attack, And it turned out to be a hoax, you know, there wasn't anything wrong with anybody. So she's just devastated. I am too by then. Anyhow, there's a shed in the backyard. You walk out to the shed, it's filled with baby caskets. Yeah. I'm like, She says, you can't use this. I ain't going in there, you know, it's fine. I don't need it. Anyhow, I move in and there's strange stuff going on all the time. I'll tell you just one. I'll tell you two. Strange stuff was this. My wife still lived, or future wife still lived in Steelville, so I'd go up there and I'd come back. I had a little Chinese pug named Priscilla, and she would sleep in the living room, I'd sleep in the back room. And the house had the old radiators, and when you turn them on, they go clunk, 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 clunk in the winter, you know, heating up and all that. So I come home, put my stuff down, lock the door. Priscilla goes into the living room, lays down in her little bed. I go to my bedroom, lay down in the bed. Clunk, 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 clunk. Silence. Jim's back. Clunk, clunk. Here comes the dog. Jumps on the bed. I swear to God, somebody said Jim's back. And I'm like, what the heck? So I go in there with my baseball bat or something, you know, looking at nothing. Don't see anything. Okay, that's not too bad. I'm not worried about it. You know, that's just one item. It goes on for a long time. But the second was, I was a coach and I got to be friends with the photographer for the local newspaper. And I had a screened in porch. Well, the second day I move in, the air conditioner breaks. The lady won't fix it, you know, and I don't know any better. I'm just a young guy, you know. So I most of the time I slept out on that porch. So anyhow, I'm out there one afternoon waiting for practice, and this black snake's crawling up the screen. The damn thing's 10 foot long. I'm not kidding. It is 10 foot long, and I'm not exaggerating a bit. It's this big, but it's just crawling right up the screen. So I called Steve Boer, the photographer. I said, you got to get this small town newspaper, you know, they're going to love this. He comes out, and the snake, you know, we're not bothering or anything, but, you know, it's just kind of hanging there, drops off, like 100 miles an hour to a shrine to Mother Mary in the backyard. I mean, right into the shrine, and it's gone. Okay. So I forget about that. No big deal. About 2 hours later, Boer calls me and says, hey, come down. I want to show you these pictures. I said, okay, cool. So I go down there and he's got his little darkroom thing going, all that. Puts it up there. Nothing on the screen. Puts it, nothing. He took 10 pictures. There was not a snake anywhere on that screen.
What?
I swear on the Bible.
That's wild.
And it went on after that. I mean, it got worse, but it's just kind of like, okay, what is this? A holy snake? Or is it a devil snake? You guys have a class?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
Just disturb you.
You're talking about important stuff here.
You want us to teach?
No.
You don't know anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Furniture would be moved. One time it destroyed the entire bedroom. My wife was there by herself. She came down, she was studying for finals, and she went to I sent her flowers. Anyway, she goes to the door and the guy, when he gets to the door, goes, ma'am, are you okay? She goes, why is she? Because in the bedroom it's going, goes in there, the bed's torn apart. It's completely taken apart. I'm talking the mattress is on the windows, both sides of the wall. The frame is taken completely apart, down on the floor, closets open, clothes everywhere, and so on.
Oh my
We say another year. All right, so on the inspection, typically on D, I never put less than 15 days on the inspection notice. So I'm gonna have, the minute we go under contract, you should have them in your phone. I'm calling the inspector to get the inspection ordered. I want to know when it's going to be immediately, and I expect it to be pretty quick. I don't want them saying, oh, we can't do it for 7 days. And I'm like, you know who I am? That's what you tell them. You know who I am. But I want it quicker than that. If I can't get it, I might go to my second inspector because I don't want it to go out too far. That's why I always put 15 days. And then if you'll look there on 183 or 163, I added 10 days if I needed a specialist because this is out in the country. It's on a well. It's on a septic and it's on a lagoon, septic and a lagoon combination. So I think on rural property, sometimes you need a little more time, but I'm never going less than 15 days. Now, on investment property, maybe no inspections at all, but on this, 15 and 10 for sure. All right, now the key to this is I'm going to do a whole house inspection, right? Mechanical, structural. They're going to do a septic. They're going to do a well. If there's a roof issue, we're going to get a roofer out there. But I've got to get all that done within 15 days unless I ask for the extension. Once that report comes in addition to the well and septic, if they're separate, then we can make or give our inspection notice. And we have to be very specific in our inspection notice. So as soon as that report comes in and I get a copy of it, I send it to the other agent. I send the entire report. I don't cherry pick anything. I say, here's a report. We'll be putting together an inspection notice within a few days. The reason I do that is I want them to know everything I'm looking at and then what we're going to be asking for. So, we're not going to ask, there's 60 pages in most of those reports now. I'm not going to be asking for 60 pages of stuff, but I'm probably going to be asking for something. So the buyer gets it, I get it, I go through it 3 times. I print it. I always print it. Because I'm old, but I want to flip pages back and forth because sometimes one thing's on one page and it carries over to the second, but I want to look at it. And I don't care what it costs, but I'm going to print it. And if I've got older people and they don't have print capabilities, I print it and hand deliver it to their house. Because I don't want this bullshit, pardon my language up there. I don't want this stuff saying, I didn't see it. I didn't read that. Yeah, you did. I gave it to you. It's all right there. So then I go through it and I kind of make a list of what I think should be addressed. And then typically the buyer, regardless of age, says, what do you think? And I'll say, here's what I think. And I send them an email in writing of what I think. And they'll say, well, you know what? I don't care about that. And I'll say, you know what? I think that's really important. I think we should include that. Or sometimes they say, I'd really like to have them do this. And I'll say, you know what? If you want that done, we'll put it in there. But if it's caulk the tub, no, I'm not putting caulk the tub in there. I'm going to buy a 75-cent tube of caulk and caulk it myself. Okay. I'm not putting that in there because I think that's dumb. All right. So we send that notice over to the seller, listing agent, and then they have 10 days to respond, which is a resolution period down in E. If box 175 is checked. If not, if you don't check that box for your buyer, and of course, it depends on how you think about this, then you can just terminate the contract. It could be a perfect inspection. The only thing on there could be caulk the tub. But the buyer has the right, if that box is not checked, to cancel or terminate the contract. Now, I want to represent my buyer, but what's a fair and balanced contract? A fair and balanced contract is the buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell. I want to give the seller the opportunity to make repairs. Because if I go in there and, they want to write a contract, they love this house. There's something about it, they want to buy it. Okay. Well, if we've got things that need to be fixed, they're getting a better house. We re-inspect, and if it's all done, they're getting a better house than what they bought. And so I don't like ever writing a contract without that box checked. That's my opinion. Now, if your buyer says, now how do I get out of that? That worries the hell out of me, doesn't it you? Because why am I working with a buyer that wants to write an offer and then get out of the contract? And I explained to them, I just don't think that's a good idea. I think that we need to try to give the seller an opportunity to make those repairs. Now, you don't have to. That's up to you. But notice what it says. If you don't check that box on 169, if an inspection notice is timely given, 1, buyer is satisfied with all inspections. 2, there are unacceptable conditions to be satisfied by seller in a workmanlike manner and prior to scheduled closing date. Or 3, buyer elects to terminate the contract with earnest money returned to buyer subject to paragraph A, accepting only as follows. And the only as follows is if we check 175, then the seller gets a chance to make those repairs. Now, here's the key. When you write an inspection notice, you should be specific. So it should say, seller to have qualified contractor blank, per the inspection report, page 12, section B, part A, whatever it said. I mean, I want to be very specific. I don't want there to be any confusion. Here's what I'm looking at. Here's what you should look at. So seller to have qualified contractor. Now, you don't need a qualified, or you don't need an electrician to replace a switch, an outlet, right? But if you've got problems in the service panel, the electrical panel, then you might have to have an electrician. You kind of use your brain on that. But you don't, I mean, qualified contractors should be able to do most of the repairs that you require. So what are you gonna write? Seller to have qualified contractors, blank, per the inspection report, paid blah, blah, blah. You don't have to put prior to closing, but you can. It says prior to closing in here, but you can put that if you want to. But again, I've already sent the inspection report to that listing agent. Hopefully he shared it with the seller, and the seller's looking at the same things we are. The resolution period, here's the deal. I send that inspection notice over, and now the seller has 10 days to respond. Hopefully they just sign it and we're going to closing and I'm going to re-inspect. I always encourage the buyers to re-inspect. But if the seller goes, you know what, you put down 10 items, I'm doing 5. My choice now is to counter, right? I could say, I could respond. There's an inspection response form. And I could say, okay, look, if you'll do 7, we're going to move forward. And the seller goes, no, I'm not doing it. I can let it sit until day 10 at midnight and the contract automatically terminates. It's right there. The language is really clear. It should be in bold, capitalized, and underlined, but it's not. Line 181, 181 says, or this contract would automatically terminate with earnest money to be refunded to buyers subject to paragraph 8. Most agents don't ever see that. I'm like, come on, man, you need to see that. Now, what can the seller do? At 11 o'clock on the 10th day, he can go back and say, wait a minute, you're serious, aren't you? I'll do everything that you asked for in the very first inspection notice. And we're going to close it. Still going to reinspect. Well, these dates and times are really important. Got a capitulation deal in there. I'm not going to mess with that because it looks like they're trying to another class here pretty soon. All right, we don't have municipal governmental inspections in most of the world, but we do have in Lebanon, Missouri.
Sure do.
$50, right?
$50.
Who pays for that, seller or buyer?
I usually do.
Why don't you put it in the contract?
Okay.
Special agreements. Seller agrees to pay the $50 for the.
If it's my listing, I pay for it, but seller does pay for it.
Okay. I mean, nothing wrong with that. I pay for a lot of stuff too, but you don't have to.
So $50 if it's lived in and $10 if it's vacant.
It should be just the opposite.
Mhm.
Because if you're living in it, it's safer than it is if it's vacant. Monette started doing something where they were gonna, I mean, they came in and said they were gonna have to put in all new meters when houses were sold and something like that. I don't know if it ever went through, but they talked about that for a while and I thought, oh God, here we go. You know, we're going to get St. Louis down here. All right. So we don't have, you guys do, you know more about it than I do, so I'm not going to talk about it. Starting on 203 all the way down to 222, you have no liability. Under Missouri law, brokers are immune from liability or statements made by engineers, surveyors, inspectors, etc., unless you hire them or unless you say it. So if they ask you, what do you think about the roof? You go, I think it needs to be replaced. Now you're liable. Or if you say, I think we should get a roofer to look at it, then you're not liable. And then they, through you, engage, not hire, engage the roofer. They, through you, engage the engineer. You're not hiring them or paying them. They're responsible for everything. You're not responsible for anything. It's nice. Missouri gives us that latitude. So, you know, because when they say broker, you know who they mean, right? Who's that? Yeah, that's me. So we don't want any liability. Home warranty, you either have one or you don't. But in this case, we marked the box. This is on 224. It says we're not having one. We don't have one. There's not one available. I don't know why people don't put home warranties on their property, because it doesn't cost them anything till they sell. And so if they're $600 now, I don't know what they are, and your client, if you said, you know, you really ought to put a home warranty on there because it'll cover everything during your listing period, and then it'll cover everything for the buyer, everything is covered for another year. You say, well, you don't want to pay for that. We don't have to until it closes. But if we have a problem between now and closing, you might be able to claim it on your warranty. Well, that's $600. Well, we're gonna list the house for $206,000. I tell you what, we'll list it for $206,000 and $600. Okay, and we pay for the home warranty. But statistically, houses sell for more money if they have a home warranty. It's not much, but 1% of 200,000 is how much? Yeah, that's a lot. That pays for the home warranty, doesn't it? And they suppose in normal times they sell like 2 or 3% faster. So you really should think about home warranty. You should have old Chasa or somebody come in and sit down and explain them to you and see if you might have an interest in those. Really does. I love a home warranty being on a house because the air conditioner goes out, you know who they call? Home warranty. If you don't have a home warranty and the air conditioner goes out, who do they call? You, the buyer's agent. Say the air conditioner went out. And you know what I say? Welcome to home ownership. No, I don't say that. All right, I told you about the disposition of earnest money and that it can go, there's a statute, 339.105.RSMO, that the money goes to the state treasurer if you can't figure out something. And on paragraph 9 on page 4, going on to 5, look, we have tornadoes, fires. We haven't had any earthquakes lately. We don't have hurricanes, but a house can be destroyed or it could be condemned by the city, but more likely it's going to be damaged if you have something like that. And if it is, then the buyer gets a choice, okay? The buyer can go back to the seller and say, look, I'll take a check for the amount of the purchase price. He gets the insurance check, he pays him whatever it is. Or the buyer can say, look, as long as you return it to the same condition it was when I wrote the offer, then I'll buy the house. Or they can just terminate the contract, which is what happens most of the time. We had a tornado a few years back. I don't remember how long it's been in Battlefield. And we had a lot of houses under contract at the time, our company. And most of them just terminated the contract. But just know that it can be done. All right, on 10, starting at line 272, down to 303. This talks about closing costs. This is not your job, okay? This is the lender's job to determine and the title company's job to determine. That's not your job. You know who determines what concessions can be taken out of a contract?
Lender.
The lender. And if you look, it says that. It says it on line 302. All these concessions we've been talking about forever and ever. On 302, it says all is approved by buyer's lender. But it can include home warranty. It can include title fees paid by the seller or a buyer's agent fee or anything like that. So remember the concessions we asked for with the FHA purchase? The lender determines, he's going to try to take every penny of it. If it's 5,000, he's going to try to take 5,000. He's going to get as close as he can to 5,000. If it's whatever the number is, okay? But we don't get to determine it. I had an agent last week arguing with me. Well, we need to add the home warranty. I said, it's clearly in the contract. You can't add that as a concession. And she said, well, we can put an amendment together and say that the seller pays for it. Do whatever you want to, but the seller doesn't have to, right? But if I've agreed to 5,000, the lender says I'm taking 5,000, he doesn't get any arguments there, right? Okay. So you can read all that if you want to. And if you want to prorate the interest paid on a loan, if your client, like they taught you in school, that's stupid. You don't ever do it. Have the title company do all that stuff. If they ask you, is there an HOA? Yes, there is. How much is it? $306 a year. And say, what's the proration on that? That's not my job. It's not your job, so don't do it, because if you make a mistake, I guarantee, I don't, it's $2 off, somebody's gonna call you on it. Let's say, everybody agrees, who determines the concessions? Lender, not you, not the title company, not the other agent. Lender determines the concessions, all right. Paragraph 11, this is a binding contract, get that? If we, both of us sign it in Missouri, it's enforceable as a binding contract. That's why when she says, I want out, I don't feel good about this anymore. That's not how it works, but we did. It's assignable. So Amanda, I buy a house, I'm moving to Lebanon. I've got that house up there under contract. And then Marnie says, oh, no, buddy, we want you to be our new broker. I go, dang, Amanda, I can't buy that house now. And she goes, why don't you just assign it to someone? I've got another buyer. It's a simple amendment that says all parties agree that the buyer will now be blank. That's it. We all sign it, we're done. All that buyer has to do is honor the same terms or conditions and conditions of the original offer. It's that simple. One page. 1031 exchange. If you deal with commercial, somebody's going to ask you at some point about a 1031 exchange. Here's the deal. I buy this duplex, not duplex. Let's say I buy a restaurant and it's not very good shape, but I fix it up, man, I'm killing it. I paid $200,000. Now I sell it for $500,000 2 years later, okay? I've got $300,000 in capital gains. $300,000 on capital gains times in Missouri, 21% is the taxes I'm gonna have to pay. How much is it? $63,000. I'm not real happy about that. So I decide I'm gonna take my capital gains, my 1031 money, and I'm gonna exchange that and what the government, what originally said was like-kind property. It's any property that's an investment. So instead of that, I take my $500,000 gross, 300,000 of it profit, and I buy a $700,000 farm up in Lebanon. And I pay no taxes. And I don't have to pay any taxes until I sell that one, as long as I make a profit or break even. But it just pushes those taxes forward unless, you know, you get somebody that's got an apartment complex, sells for $3 million that they paid $1 million for, and they got basically their basis is $1 million is what they call it. They got $2 million in capital gains times 21%, that's $400,000. They don't want to give that to the government, right? The government didn't do a damn thing. They didn't clean the rooms. They didn't do anything, but they want the money. So you got to find a way. This is a legal way to do it. Now, you have to have a good title company that understands 1031 exchange to do this properly, because the buyer can never touch, or the seller can never touch the funds. So if you need any help with that, you can call me, but you can also just go online and read, like, you know, kind of a summary of what it is. It gives you a better understanding. On 12, on the next page, listen, the lawyers say the contract is the four corners, the 8 pages, the four corners of the contract. That's a contract. That's not it. You ever get sued, they're going to want every document that was initialed and signed. So you just think of it that way. But certainly everything having to do with the contract that's initialed or signed is a part of the contract. That's the beauty of command, right? Or .loop, whatever it is. Every document's there. We had to find a sewer certificate for property in Stone County, and we sold it 3 years ago. There it is, sitting right there. We didn't have to call the title company, didn't have to get a sewer inspector out there. All right, on paragraph 13, listen, just like my client, I had to explain to her again. I explained to her when she wrote the contract. I said, we do not default, but if you choose to default, there are remedies and they're both bad. These paragraphs are exactly the same, only they switch. If seller defaults, buyer may. If buyer defaults, seller may. Number one is specific performance. You can be enforced. You can force somebody to sell their house or buy the house. Evan DeShong had a client, a seller, who right before closing decided we weren't going to sell his house. This was last year. Buyer wanted to buy the house, had the money, had the funds ready, went to the closing, said, I'm ready, willing, and able to close. Seller didn't show up. Buyer sues. 1 year later, the buyer won and moved that person, that family out of their house. Specific performance, so it can be done. The other option is you terminate the contract, you're in default, and then the buyer or the seller, whichever one sues for default, gets paid for damages. So I sold a house 2 years ago now. It was under contract for $855,000. And then the buyer walked away 5 days before closing, said it didn't appraise. Didn't have any proof that it ever appraised it. There was no appraisal. My seller had already sold all of her furniture and bought a condo in Branson. Does she have damages? Yes. So she sued. She had obvious damages because then we have to market cooled after that. We sold the $855,000 house that didn't have this $1 million furniture now for $825,000. So there's $30,000 in damages. She had to move, which cost her $13,000. She had an auction for all of her personal property where she lost about $20,000. And then she bought another condo. She had closing costs and things like that. So she sued, I think, for $150,000. I'd have sued for $825,000 myself. But anyhow, they're settling it this month. So we'll see what happens. And then 3, you can pursue in both of these any remedy under the law. Whew, that's the one that scares me. You know, I had to go see a psychiatrist. You know what I mean? You'd have to really go see one, but you could just, I mean, you can sit around and say, I'm damaged, man. This killed me, you know, right? I mean, you could do anything you wanted to, and those become damages, but any remedy under the law is a bad one. So here's what I tell my buyers if they're trying to decide they don't want to buy. Just like I told this lady, I said, Linda, we're already through inspections. The inspections weren't that bad. I said, you should probably go ahead and close. I said, you close it, I'll put it back on the market, and we'll hope that we get, you know, break you out of it dead even, or, you know, if you lose 3%, you know, this is a good property. I said, but if they sue you for default, yeah, for specific performance, you're going to be in a lawsuit for 12 to 18 months, and it's going to cost you a lot of money. And then 18 months from now, they could force you to buy this house. And so I want you to think about that. Well, will you try to get me out first? Yeah, but I'm just warning you ahead of time. So I've told my buyers that before, the best thing to do, we're through inspections. They've already done the repairs. You know, you don't have any right. The lender's going to loan you the money. You need to close, and then I'll sell it. I'll put it back on the market, and Keller Williams will charge nothing on the list side. We won't get paid on the list side. It doesn't sound fun, but I mean, still, that's a better way to do it than having your client go through default. And then if they go, oh, so, you know, here's a name and number of an attorney that you should talk to. Especially if the seller goes, no, we're going to closing. Prevailing party, don't worry about that. It doesn't work in Missouri. On the seller's disclosure statement, make sure if you're the listing agent, you put up a disclosure statement, even if it says nothing. Now, the new MLS rules are coming out. In fact, the software is not going to allow you to put a listing into Somo unless you have the lead-based paint in there separately, if it has lead-based paint. The disclosures, they won't do that, but lead-based paint, it's going to require it. But the point is this. If you have disclosures, get them up, because look at B. Okay, I went and looked at this house, wrote the offer, and they didn't have a disclosure statement. So I'm saying, I checked box B and it says, okay, I got to get one to them within 1 day. And then they have 3 days to review it. And then if they don't like it, they can terminate the contract. How would you like to tell that to your seller? Oh, I forgot to put the disclosures up. We're not under contract anymore. I mean, you're fired. And I've done that before. I've done that a number of times where I just brain poop and don't get the disclosure up. And somebody calls me and says, you know, are there any disclosures on the house? And I'm like, oh yeah. You know, it's just, I mean, but can you imagine how that would be, how that conversation would be with your seller if you didn't put disclosures up and then they terminated the contract, the buyer did? It'd be a bad deal. And then I see it says, no seller's disclosure statement will be provided by the seller. Not exactly, because those 4 items on the disclosure are required by statute. So that's got to be required. You know, so you got to get those checked one way or the other. Then you can go all the way to the last page and sign it and say that, you know, they're not making any further disclosures. I will tell you this, the people who do rehabs, flips, remodels, whatever you call them, that don't do disclosures are idiots. You stripped it down to the studs, you rewired the house, you put in new plumbing, and you know nothing. I mean, you're asking for a lawsuit. We've got one, had a call yesterday on one. You know, they didn't make any disclosures and it's gonna cost them, and it's an agent too. Right, lead-based paint disclosure, that's required. Walkthroughs, utilities have to be on. Contract says it now. Utilities have got to be turned on. They can't say, no, I'm not turning on utilities. You just point to the contract and say they have to be turned on. When you do a walkthrough, I mean, it's best to do it a couple days before closing if you can. But if the house is not vacant, sometimes you got to go back and look at it again. I've had agents argue that you can't do that. Sure you can. So say the clients are only available 4 days before we go do the walkthrough, the stuff's still all over the place. Then you as an agent, I think, should go back. And if you have to, do a video, whatever they call it, FaceTime, look, it looks good, everything's okay, type of deal. Because you'd be amazed how many times they take the refrigerator out and the water line, it doesn't have a valve on it, and the kitchen's flooded. Or a toilet's broken, or they've knocked a door in when they were moving the furniture out and things like that. And you've got to take care of your client in that respect. On signatures, all it's saying here is that, look, you can sign, one guy can sign white, one can sign wet, pardon me, one can sign electronic, one can sign fax. You can sign all over the place, okay? That's all that's saying. And then when it talks about the governing law and construction on a contract, have you noticed that now sometimes we want to list a house and the seller is 3 siblings who all have wives or husbands or significant others or its or them's or whatever. They have some of that, and you've got to have all those people in there. But when we refer to it in the contract, we don't say all the sellers, we say seller. And if there's multiple buyers, which is fairly common, we just refer to it as buyer. That's all that means on governing law and construction. On 20, notices on the next page. Don't do anything unless you do it in writing. Nothing. Don't do anything unless you do it in writing. Anything that gets changed, altered in any way in the contract, any agreements, do it in writing. Don't do anything else. No handshakes, kiss, hugs, all that stuff. I mean, I like a lot of agents, but I want it in writing. I don't care what it is. And then get this now and understand this. You've been given notice that something exists when it's sent. So if you counter me, everybody pay attention now. I'm getting a counter from her. My client signed it. As soon as I send it, we're done, okay? She sends me a counter, my client sign it, I sit it on the table. We don't have an agreement. We don't have anything. This happened here in the company with Dan Holt. Dan Holt had a listing, lady up north, really nice, good agent, wrote an offer on it. Dan's people countered. She got her people to sign it that day when they countered on a Saturday about 11 o'clock. Then she went to some kids' events and all that. Then she went to dinner that night on Saturday. Then she got up in the morning and went to church. And then she went to lunch after church. And at 2 o'clock, she sends a counter. And Dan said, I'm sorry, we accepted another offer. Well, you can't do that. I told you we were going to sign it. If it's not sent, it doesn't exist. That thing doesn't exist. When I first started, we were still using fax machines and hand delivering. And I'd call somebody and say, hey, we've accepted another. You can't do that. We countered. I mean, we signed the counter and you wouldn't know. They just sit there right there while you're talking to them, signing the counter. Not anymore though, because once that thing goes into Gmail or AOL or whatever you're using, unless it comes back, it's there. And so we're done. It might be in spam, but it's there, so that's why we do it in writing. That's why you do it immediately. I mean, I don't know about you. I only live 6 minutes. I got a scanner at home, but I just drive back to the office. I scan it. I mean, it's going right there. 6 minutes, I'm gone. Because I don't want I know what can happen. And boy, in the last 2 years, you really had to do it quick, but now I've got 6 minutes at least. Okay, we talked about all the riders. The government loan rider, you're gonna use it on every government loan. You don't see that many backups. The subdivision review rider was added by the state of Missouri. They think somebody wants to review the subdivision. I get it. We've had a few over time that owe a lot of money or haven't collected money and things like that. We don't see it very often. The condominium rider is really important in Branson. I don't know about in your area, in Lebanon. It's not that important here in Springfield. We don't use it that much. But there's a contingency for sale of buyer's existing property. That's if it hasn't, it's not under contract. It might not even be on the market. That's the one to use. Make sure you use the right one. And then the contingency for closing a buyer's existing property is if it's under contract and we're heading to closing. And the rental property rider, we talked about that. That's one of those, you'll see it occasionally. Use it if you need it. And then if you'll notice on 398 and 401, it said, look, this contract's not worth a dang for a new construction. And it's not, is it? No, because you go out and show a new construction property, right? And you get out there and it's closed in. It's in what they call dry. It's dried in. It's got the roof on it, windows in, all that. But you still don't have the brick or the siding. You still don't have the post finished in the front. You don't have a driveway. You don't have a sidewalk. You don't have any flooring. You don't have any paint. You don't have any light fixtures. You don't have an island. You don't have any ranges. Those things have to be dealt with in a contract. So the best thing you can do is write into the contract under special agreements, seller / builder and buyer and buyer's agent to meet within 7 days to complete selection list for all finishes. And then a lot of times a builder will have a list. It'll be right down there and say heritage shingles, brown. And then your buyer has to check that and initial it and date it. And he initials and dates, the buyer does, or the builder does. And then it'll say Corian, whatever, I don't know, tile, slate, something in the bathroom. I mean, all those things need to be decided because if they're not decided, you're gonna walk into the house and you're gonna have cork floor and luxury vinyl, and you're not gonna have the stuff you want. So you have to be very careful. And your responsibility, we had a builders panel up here 2 weeks ago, and they said, we want you involved. All 5 builders said, we want you involved. We want you to check on the progress. I think that's important. And I don't care what you know about construction, check on it, make sure it's going where it is. And you should have your little sheet with you that says they check heritage brown shingles or whatever they are. If you need to, if you're gonna make a list, then you can go back up here on 397 and put other, and then include that. A rider that says all of these things that I want in this house. Maybe the house is already bricked and it's got the driveway and the sidewalk and all that, but they're finishing up finishes and there's some things you want to do.
Can you state that again, please? The statement you said for new construction for the sellers and the buyers and the builders to review?
Yeah. Seller / builder, because it's typically, a lot of times the seller and the builder are the same person. And buyer and buyer's agent agree to meet within 7 days to select all finishes for this property, or 123 Smith Street, or whatever it might be. And that's a key. I mean, it's really important because if I'm paying stupid prices now for new construction, I should get what I want, even if it's luxury vinyl. And then you say on special agreements, property is 56 acres more or less. I'm making sure that that's included in there because it doesn't say it anywhere. And I didn't include the other because remember I said it was 53 acres was shown on the plat that she had in documents, but the seller owned the 2 acres that adjoin the road. So I just said property is 56 acres more or less. And then I see line 18 for included items. Now, Gary Keller has said from the beginning of the first time I ever heard him talk, you should buy real estate. So if you do buy real estate, then you've got a personal interest disclosure. You know, are you a party to the transaction or a principal of a company or whatever you might be? But also when you're representing your family, you should write that in there. And the MREC wants this, and MR added it, because they think that, you know, you might try to take advantage of somebody since it's your family member, which is, you know, you're gonna do the best job you can for everybody. I mean, maybe you work harder for your little sister, I don't know, but point is, they want to know if it's in there. They want it disclosed. And if it's not disclosed, you can get in trouble. Sources of broker's compensation, seller's gonna pay mine. I'm not taking anything from the buyer, but listen, I think a buyer's agent should charge something. I don't care what you charge. Janet Parsons over at Remax, she's been in it for 43 years. I think all 43, she's been charging $4.95 per side. And here's how she justified. She told me, she says, "This is so I don't have to call you." But that's Janet Parsons. I've heard her explain that to me 10 times. I'm like, I don't think that's what you're supposed to say.
So if you're charging a transaction fee for your buyer, do you check
Buyer.
seller and buyer? Okay.
But I don't charge one. And again, I agree with it. Listen, I've been working with this woman, like I said, for 11 months now, almost 12. I've shown her, let's say 12 properties. They're all higher end properties. I've got great compensation, but I put over 1,000 miles on my truck, maybe 2,000 miles easy, showing property. And not only the time. And when does she want to see stuff? Sunday afternoon, when I want to be with my 10-year-old. Yeah. And my wife. So the point is, I've taken a lot of time and looked at a lot of property and all of this, and I've not been compensated yet. I mean, I should charge her a buyer's fee. And here's what she had the gall to say to me too. Once she wanted out of the contract, she says, "Just tell me what your commission would have been and I'll write you a check." I should have said, "Okay." But I was offended by that. I mean, you think we do this, I mean, we do it, get paid, but there's more to it, right?
Can you
When
even?
this lady's 80 years old, lost her husband and all of that, we do it. I mean, we're really trying to help. I mean, it's important to me that I take care of her and her daughter. And I was really offended. I mean, I blasted her pretty good too. And if she'd have fired me, I'd have been fine with it. But I said, you know, if that's all you think of me after 12 months of, you know, me trying to find you a property and working with you, you know, it's really sad. I mean, I went on to say some more things too, but I won't bring up the email that I sent. Anyhow, you can get compensated, but if you're getting compensated by the buyer too, it needs to be on the contract because MREC, if they ever review it, it should be on the buyer's side, your buyer's compensation. And again, I don't care what you charge. I think you deserve it. And if you put it on your exclusive right to purchase form that you're going to charge $250, it says, are you getting it right now? Or are you getting it at closing? And you can get it right now. I mean, gas is $3.29 a gallon in Springfield. Look at that times 1,000 miles. I'm in the hole already.
And it needs to be written to Keller Williams.
No,
Not
yeah, it'll go to Keller Williams, but it goes straight through. We don't take anything. I don't have anything to do with that. But the company doesn't take any money from your admin fees. But you know, Reese and Nichols, they raised theirs to $250. And you don't put it on the contract, they take it out of your commission. They call it just a transaction fee, but that's part of how the company makes money. I mean, I was over there for 10 years and it made me mad, but I had to enforce it. But now they've raised it another 100, either 100 or 150. And I'm like, and it's every agent on every transaction. It doesn't matter if it's 15,000 or 500,000. That'd burn my butt, man, having to pay the company some more money just to work there. All right, so we're writing the contract. We've got an agreement, right? Exclusive right to purchase. And so we are a buyer's limited agent. And then on 428, if you're working at Keller Williams, you're also a designated agent. And then The licensee assisting the seller, I looked on the MLS and it said she's a seller's limited agent, but she's also a designated agent. It said she was a designated agent. So I marked those boxes for her. I also filled out all of my stuff. Now, Chris, you can see that's my wife. I've never made any money. She's the one that signs all the contracts. But I've got all her stuff filled in there. You need to put the broker's license number in your phone, right? You guys are young enough to do that. I don't know how to do it. I have to look it up every time. But you've got to have the broker's license number there, and you've got to have your license number. But when I'm filling out the contract, I filled out all her stuff too. Why would I do that? Because when it comes to compliance, I want it kicked back after I've worked for 12 months and I don't get paid because she hadn't signed something or she doesn't have her license number in there or something. So I just did it all for her, except sign it. That's a good idea, isn't it? Say, yes, it is, Jim. You're so smart.
You're so smart.
Will you read your license number? I can't see that far.
My license number?
Or the Greater Springfield.
2003 023935. And it's on every listing. So when you pull up one of your listings, or I think even if you pull it up to show it, I think it'll have your broker number on there. So that's where I always find it. But just in case. And then you need to know your own number, obviously. I can remember mine, but I never sell anything. We are a franchise. Paragraph 26. On 27, all the sales information is going to go to the MLS, to the board, and we're trying to establish market value. That's what we're trying to do. You know, if prices settle, and I think they've settled, they haven't come down, but they've settled. Maybe they've come down a little bit on some of the mid-range price homes. We need to know that because then when we go to sit down to list a property or represent a buyer, then we know that we're paying the right price. Now, last 2 years was so stupid, you never knew what the right price was. But I think, like on any contract, we always, Lene and I, my partner, we do a CMA before we ever write an offer. Every time. We're going to do a CMA. It takes 5 minutes. What the hell? You got all the data right there, you know, and I can tell basically whether the house is priced right or not. I just think that's a good idea. And then if it's not, if I think it's priced too high, I'm going to take the CMA to my buyer and say, look, here's what I've discovered. You can write it for whatever you want to. Most of the time they want to write it because they want it. I still show it to them. Now on 28 and 29, that is not our job. FERPTA and anti-terrorism. We're not supposed to do that. I'm not going to ask somebody because their name is Gandhi. Are you a terrorist? Can you legally buy a house? That's not my job. I let the title company do all that stuff. And you should too. Don't try to be the US CIA, DEA, whatever, NSA. That's not your job. But what's funny is, so this lady I was telling you about in Willard, she was born in England. And she has dual citizenship. I think she has dual citizenship. She may not be a citizen of the United States. I'm not sure. But anyhow, she said, don't worry, I've got my little certificate. Okay, yeah, make sure you provide it to the title company. All right, acceptance and deadline. Look, I think if I show a property at, let's say 9 in the morning, okay? I go in and show it at 9 in the morning, and the seller has to leave for me to show it, and my clients want to write an offer and I get it done by noon, I think by 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they ought to be able to give me an answer. So my deadline, if I did that, what I just told you, would be 8 p.m., June 14. Maximum, if they leave the house, I think should be 24 hours. They got a sign in the yard. It's on the MLS. It's on Zillow, Realtor.com, KW, whatever. They want to sell it, right? So within 24 hours, they ought to be able to make a decision. When an agent calls me or whatever and says, we need 4 or 5 more hours. I'm like, no, I'm not giving you any more time. Give me an answer, you know, because we write good offers. We're not writing stupid offers. But 24 hours. If it's a foreclosure property, it doesn't matter. It might take them a week to answer. So don't expect to put in a deadline. And then if it's vacant, I usually call the other agent, say, look, we're considering writing an offer. How much time do you need? Where are these people at? If they're in town, they don't need any time more than anybody else. But if one of them's in Gandhi and one of them's in, doing a mission trip in Africa, or I guess that's the same place. I don't know. Anyhow, they're not around, then how much time do you need? And then down there on 468, where it says time is of the essence, look, this is on you and the buyer and the seller. Time is of the essence. As soon as I write the contract, I'm sending it to the title company. That's part of the time. I'm calling the inspection company. Remax, I can still remember this. The broker over there said, our agents we don't allow them to call the inspection company. That's the buyer. The buyer is doing that because it creates liability. Because I want it done, right? You want to get it done immediately. You want it scheduled so that the contract moves forward. And who needs to know that date? I do. So, and then lender, time is of the essence. Title company, time is of the essence. All this is everybody. So you've got to do that. Now, when they're talking about a day, they're talking about 24 hours. So if I write a contract today and I've got a 10-day inspection period, I start counting on 15. Right? So today's the 14th, but I write the offer, it's accepted. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's my 10-day inspection period. So at midnight on the 10th day, by God, I better have an inspection notice over, or it's my fault. I mean, not really. Sometimes it is the seller, but it could be my fault. All right, then if you notice on 472, look who signed this. Remember, it was Norman and Linda Shaw Family Trust. Jeanette is the signatory. And then under there, I put Norman and Linda Shaw Family Trust. And if it says down there on 478, I could have filled this on. If signing on behalf of a trust or other legal entity, please print its name. It's in the first line, so I didn't do it. And if you guys disrespect me because of that, I'm okay. I want to show you one more thing, though. I think your class starts at 12, doesn't it? So I'm going to show you. So they sent us a counteroffer. Get this. Is that counteroffer 2? Yeah, they sent us a counteroffer. Let me find that one. Let me see here. Yeah. Hang on, I want to show you this. Okay. There it is, counteroffer. All right, so he wanted 720. We offered 689, but I included all those appliances, everything. Now he wants $31,000 more. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that. But yeah, look though, with appliances, all kitchen appliances and washer and dryer, tractor and all implements, no lawnmower. Now look at implements though. Got it? Loader, brush hog, box scraper, log splitter. What's missing? Yeah, he left that out too. He says no lawnmower, but what's missing on implements?
Tractor?
The tractor itself.
No, he's got
No,
the
it's down,
tractor.
it's underneath. Yeah, there it is.
The backhoe.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like $3,000 or $4,000, even on a little Kubota, right?
Mhm.
I couldn't believe it. I thought, you sucker, you increase the price to 720, you're gonna keep the backhoe. I was mad that he was keeping the lawnmower, but I got it. If he's moving to Florida, he'd probably still use the lawnmower. But if he's moving to Florida, the chances of him taking the tractor and all that stuff with him, pretty slim, you know? So I knew he probably wanted to sell it anyway. But I was a little upset about that. Anyhow, so look, he repeated it
He
again.
repeated
No
it
lawnmower.
3 times.
Huh?
3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no lawn movement.
He wanted me to know that he wasn't getting that. I wasn't getting that. So we countered. And all attachment and link to a shop, including the backhoe. Anyhow, We got it done at 7:10 is where we ended up, but it didn't close anyway, so it doesn't matter.
So-
I can't believe they let us out. Yeah,
Would you just attach all these offer and counter offers as riders onto the original document when you send it? Or like, how does that process go?
if you're, when you get ready to close, now, yeah, all these documents, if, to the title company, you've got the contract, which the original offer, because that names everybody, it's the terms and conditions, and then your counters. Now, in a counter offer, unless you change something from the original offer, then it stays in the original offer. For example, if I would have asked for $5,000 in concessions and they never countered that $5,000 in concessions would have stayed there in the contract all the way through the counters. If I would have asked for a home warranty, then it would have stayed there all the way through unless they changed it.
So if they said they countered like no home warranty, would you
Yes.
need to go back and
They
change
have to
that?
counter it, yeah.
So do you just attach the counter offer, or do you need to actually go back to this original one and take it off?
No,
Or-
the counter offer does it.
Okay, so
The
you
language in the counter offer does it. So we finished, we had 3 counters there. So I've got the original contract, counter 1, counter 2, counter 3. I'll go to the title company.
Okay.
Counter 2 is the one that typically establishes, like in this case, price and some other things. Now, and let's back onto this real quick. A lender is not gonna wanna see all those implements on there. So if I put all those implements on there, the last thing I have to put on there is at no value. Got it? So if I want the refrigerator, and that's all I want from this house, then I get a loan. Seller to include refrigerator and kitchen at no value. Seller to include lawn tractor at no value. But it has to be at no value because the lenders freak out. They'll loan money on a dishwasher, but they can't loan money on a refrigerator. It's stupid stuff.
So then you get sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm really fresh to all this. So now you have an accepted offer, you counter offered, you attached it all, and then have you done your part? Like you send it to the loan, you send it to, and then you just sit back and
No.
collect what's next?
No, you're like this, you're like the vulture. Up in a tree limb, you're sitting there hanging over, watching every move to make sure it gets done. The inspector, if I don't see most of the inspectors now in our area have super keys. If that lockbox doesn't get popped at 12 when he's supposed to be there, I'm on the phone to him. Where are you? Oh, I'm running a little bit late.
I guess I mean like as far as paperwork, are you done?
Probably not, but the paperwork that you might get now might be amendments. Something changes, you're gonna have to extend a date or move a date forward, or maybe you need to add a name or take a name off.
Inspection notice.
Inspection notice, yeah, that paperwork that comes back, if we got, that could be a lot. And I was gonna show you, see, because you are new, here's the 60-page inspection report. And 10 pages at least is crap, just junk. What are you going, fluff?
Mhm.
Sorry, should be crap.
It's all crap.
There it is. He starts right, he starts with that, but the point is that you've got to go through it page by page. And this house was in really good shape, even though it's wood sided. Clean the roof. There just wasn't much to it. There's a board that the stain didn't take all the way on. I was really disappointed in the buyer. And I told her, I said, now, I can make this look like it's falling apart, by writing up, like, it had 2 or 3 boards that weren't stained and a little bit of rot under one window. I told her, I said, we'll just write it up and tell them to repair all exterior wood that's damaged and restain the entire house at a cost of $4,000 is what it costs. And they did it. So we've been, is that morally right? Probably not, but I'm representing the buyer. It's legally right because you can put anything you find in the inspection report in the inspection notice. And you just make it sound worse than it is, which really made me sick to my stomach. I didn't have to do it, thank God. And I told him to remove and trim all the vegetation away from the home and remove any dead vegetation and replant with new trees. I mean, that's what I would have put to get it done, but, which was wrong, just totally wrong. And you can see, look at this, there's a rot right there. See where his finger is on that picture? That's all the rot there was on that entire house. 4,000 square feet. Just little, I mean, just dumb little stuff. Oh yeah, he wants, this guy, every time he writes anything about the ground drain lines, which is the gutters, he said they should be extended and buried below the surface, which is stupid. But I was gonna write that up. I was gonna put, you know, you gotta bury all these things. They've got to be drained at least 20 feet away. I mean, just, you can do that. You don't want to. And I'm glad I didn't have to because I would have been embarrassed. All right. Any questions at all? I'll show you the end of this down here. See, here's all the people involved in the transaction. Are you looking at that? You're talking about, you want to put all these people in there. You've got emails. Lene, Sori, and Abby both work with me, so I've got them in there and I copy them on most stuff. If I don't copy them, they can just go in and see it anyway. Angel's with the title company. Randy Floyd is this lady's financial planner. I got Rebecca in there twice, but she had 2 different emails. And then my wife, who signs everything, she's in there. She didn't do anything, she signed it. All right. Wasn't that fun? And it was only 2 hours and 46 minutes. You don't have any questions at all?
You explained it so well.
Oh, yeah, I know. But again, the deal is you can always call. And, you know, like you had somebody call me yesterday. I think I called him Steve, but it was Rex. The whole conversation. But, you know, there are questions that she knows the answer to, or maybe she's not sure about, so she can just say, hey, call down there. You'll know. And I've been through it enough that eventually, I mean, most of the time I know what we're doing. And if I don't, I'll say, you know what? I'm not sure on that. I've never run into that. Just, you know, but here's what I think you should do. But you don't want to get yourself in trouble, is what you don't want to do. It's better to ask a question, do it right the first time. And then after you've written 15 or so, I wouldn't say that many, maybe 6. You feel pretty comfortable with it. And after that, it's just, you know, let's stack them up, baby. Get them on the board. How many you got on the board right now? 10?
17.
17. See, 200 a year is not going to be a big deal for you. I knew it wasn't.
We already have 37, 40, close.
This year?
Yeah.
So that'll put you at 64. But you might not make 200 this year, but you could, because you got personnel now.
Yeah.
How many transactions closed in Lebanon every year?
I think last year there were 386 or something like that.
But you're going through the whole area, just like we are.
Mhm.
Like, you know, the Keller Williams deal, there's 1 in every 5 houses that were sold in the United States were sold by a Keller Williams agent, or we were involved somewhere.
Mhm.
We either listed it or wrote the contract on it. So that's, you up for that for you, you should be at like 40% at least. You know, we're at 20% nationwide or worldwide. You should be at 40% if you're going to dominate the market. You got to get rid of that one girl up there that's just so mean. What's her name? Love Camp? One on the sign.
Becky Burke.
Becky Burke.
Oh, yeah.
She's been there
Been
forever.
there forever.
How old is she?
Too old.
We're not recording, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we stopped, right? I never heard recording stopped.
I mean, that woman, I've dealt with her a few times. You
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Used to work for her.